The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
I'd like to call the board meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, I'd ask Rhonda to please read the mission statement.
We educate all students to be college, career, and community ready, inspired to succeed in our diverse world.
Thank you. I don't think I'm on. Next is our open forum. Before we start our open forum, I'd just like to remind members of the public that they can view the board agenda and handouts and minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. Click on our district and on the top, and then our Board of Education on the left. And on that left menu, you'll find a link to agendas and minutes. This link will take you to a website called Neptune, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from board meetings are housed. Regarding our public engagement opportunities, the board will provide our community with 2 different opportunities during tonight's meeting to speak before the board. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak, and the forms are on the table outside. If you wish to speak during tonight's forum, you may do so with respect to items that are posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meetings law prohibits the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board will also permit public participation during agenda items that the Board of Education will be voting on as noted on the board's agenda. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. The timekeeper will let you know when your 5 minutes has ended. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. Lastly, demonstrations during public comments such as clapping or cheering in response to either public comments or statements made by board members are prohibited. At this time, I have one person who's indicated a desire to speak before the board, so I'll call up Noah Becker. Oh, okay. Okay.
Just a subtle little.
Yeah.
Finger.
I don't think I'm going to take 5 minutes. All right. So this evening I'm speaking about the possibility.
Sorry, no. Name and address, please. Thanks.
I'm going to do that every time I speak at one of
That's
these.
okay.
I'm Noah Becker. I live at 1254 Reed Street. All right. This evening I'll be speaking on introducing periods 9 and 10 to the school day to form a staggered start, allowing students to start at period 1, period 2, or period 3. This issue has been brought up before, and different ideas about delaying start time, most specifically in high schools, have been brought up as well. Actually by the ICSE quite a few times. These haven't really gone anywhere with the board, and I don't know how well they've actually been listened to by the board, but I mean, I wrote a 10-page research paper. Half of it's research, half of it is implementation. So the first half basically outlines why I feel it's important, It's shared with all of you, by the way. You can go to it. It should be in your emails. The first part talks about data and why I feel it's necessary that the board figure out some way to have a delayed start time option for students. And then the second half talks about why I feel doing a staggered start is the best way to do that. So the general idea is that delaying start time, it comes with a couple problems, transportation mostly, and extracurricular activities. Those are the two things that are always brought up to just immediately kill it without discussion. So I addressed that by adding periods 9 and 10 instead. Therefore, if you add periods 9 and 10 rather than just delaying the start of period 1, if you just add periods 9 and 10, then students have that option to take 2 through 9 or 3 through 10, rather than forcing the entire schedule back by half an hour, or some set time. And it tends to work better, and I have it worked out in such a way that it can be almost or completely free to the district to do it. So that's my general idea. And of course all the data shows, depression rates go down, vehicular accidents go down, student attendance goes up. So I think the benefits are very clear and they're outlined in this. And the implementation is outlined pretty well in this. So I hope that I'd like to work with the district to at least talk about or at least discuss trying to do something like this, given the great benefit that it could have for the district, rather than just having it die because of sports or transportation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Noah. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the board? I see Celestine.
Slipping in as if she's
You
been
may
there
go
getting a
ahead.
haircut.
Sorry, I was a little late. So thank you for the open forum, that opportunity to speak. I know that this is Chris's last meeting today or coming up.
Celestine, sorry, name and address.
Sorry, right? I should know that.
Well,
Celestine Jeffries, 614 Kellogg Street, 54303. So I served on school board with Chris, sat next to him for 6 years. And before that, I had many wonderful encounters with Chris when he was the principal of Preble. I will miss you. I learned a lot from you sitting next to you on the board. I love the way that you did things. You always had your notes prepared, ready to go, ready to talk about whatever issues were before us, that you thought about issues from multiple angles, multiple perspectives, and I appreciated that. I will miss you. Sorry you're moving to North Carolina. It's their gain and our loss. But yeah, I just wanted to come before the board and say that you were great to serve with, and wish you weren't going, but understand why you are. And that's it. I don't have anything more to give you today. Next time I come, I'll
All right.
bring a check or something.
Thank you, this was lovely.
Thank you for the kind words,
Thank you.
Celestine.
Thank you, Celestine. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the board? Seeing none, we'll move to our roll call. Sandy?
Becker?
Here.
Dorf?
Here.
Maloney?
Here.
McCoy?
Here.
Sitnikov?
Here.
Wagner?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Becker? Noah? Here.
All 7 board members are present. We're also joined at the table to my left by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent. To my far right, Noah Becker, who's one of our intercity student council members. And to my far left, Sandy Heller, our board secretary. At this point, I would entertain a motion under minutes.
I move that the minutes of the regular board meeting dated June 18th, 2018, special board meeting dated July 9, 2018, and special board meeting closed sessions dated June 18, 2018, and July 9, 2018, as presented, be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have no communications to place on file, and next is monitoring reports, and that will be facilitated by Laura McCoy.
Okay, we're going to be hearing about the school perception survey results.
Good evening, everyone. Stephen Miller, Director of Assessment, and I've been asked to pinch hit for school perception staff who were not able to send an attendee tonight. So I'll run through the data with you, answer the questions that I can, and bring back the questions I'm not able to answer. Feel free, if you have questions along the way, to let me know, and I will do my best to answer those. So I'm not sure. This is not the right one.
That's the second.
That is the right one.
There you go.
All right. So I'm not going to read everything that's on each slide. I'll try to highlight a couple of what I thought were the important points. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. But I would just point to the fact that there was 53% participation rate in the most recent staff perception survey. That compares to 75% in 2017 and 81% in 2016. Obviously, with that lower number, we've been looking at why that might have occurred. One of the things that's a more recent phenomenon for us is the amount of surveying we're doing with our staff, students, and parents. And so we are wondering if survey fatigue might be playing a role. Not only was it the third year in a row of doing this particular survey, but we are also asking for a lot more feedback from our school community in general. So that may have had a negative impact on overall participation rates. Another hypothesis you could make is that people feel like things are going pretty well. And so when people feel like things are going pretty well, a lot of times they don't feel the need to provide feedback or input. Those are two hypotheses that we've looked into. A third possibility, in consulting with the vendor, one of the things they did say that can happen over time is that if staff don't see the immediate connection between their feedback on the survey and actions being taken, that you can see declining participation rates. So something we could explore is the possibility of being much more explicit in our convocation with regards to the actions and activities we're taking with regards to the feedback, and see if that has an impact on survey participation next time around.
I have a question about that. So what, because I'm somewhat new to the board, in the past, there's obviously, you said there's a lot of surveys happening. What has been done with the results? Because I have heard that as well, that nothing's going to happen anyway, so why am I filling this out? So do you know, or are you aware of what's happened in the past with the results of the surveys and how it was communicated?
Yeah, I would actually defer to Michelle, because she's spoken about the survey results in the last two convocations that we had.
Yes, absolutely. Our executive directors work directly with our principals, and they have a protocol and process put in place that is part of the school improvement plan. And for further details, Andrea's here. She certainly could speak to it. We talked this afternoon about that process and protocol. If more information is asked for, we could certainly do that, or we can just, she's making her way up here to just talk a little bit. Ann is here as well. But the expectation is that principals take this data and embed it into part of their school improvement planning.
Good afternoon. We do have a process in place that all executive directors do use with all administrators, school administrators, and their school leadership teams. So we go through at our administrative retreat, we go through the data with them. We look at comparison of district to individual schools. So, and that's important because it's our schools that we're comparing to each other. From there, they do plan with their building leadership team first, presentation to their staff. They choose 3 to 4 areas where they feel they need improvement, and then they set action or strategies to improve in that area. Do you want to talk a little bit about the template, Anne, and the progress monitoring?
Thank you. We provide a little bit too close. We provide the schools with a template that we ask them to choose their goals, and so that's the first step of the process, in the process that Andrea talked about with their
with their leadership team, but really their entire staff is part of that. And then we do a check-in on the goals, mid-year and end of year. And the principal reports out what their strategies, what they thought they would put in place for strategies, what strategies they were able to put in place, and then what they've seen as results. And then in addition, they do a check-in every month, and it's really an informal check-in, and sometimes it's a post-it note process where it's, what is doing well, or what's going well, what do you have concerns about, or what would you like me to know? And so that also then can wrap into the template so that we're able to, so the principals are able to really work with their staff to be sure of those areas. And then we work very closely with them and we monitor, we make sure that we talk about that. That's part of the times that we sit down together for our mid-year check-in and end-of-year check-in on that.
So based on all of that, do you think you might have a reason for why the participation rate is so much lower? I mean, we're talking almost sometimes 1,000 people plus.
That's a great question. We actually looked at that. It's about 600 fewer people took the perceptual survey from school perceptions this year. That is the survey that gives us growth over time because we have 3 data points now, 3 years. When I say over time, it's 3 years. I believe that, similar to what Steve Miller has discussed with you when he opened up the presentation, is that we've had too many surveys. We as in central office, we really have talked, this afternoon we came together as a team and looked, Gwen shared with us that we had 700 fewer teachers who took school perception, so certified staff, I shouldn't say just teachers, but certified staff. So that would include your counselors, your social workers, but we had 700 fewer who took school perceptions, but did take it on a culture, climate, a survey that was designed within our staff through a group of us who sit on a team and worked with Gwen on designing a culture and climate survey. And I know she's going to be talking more about that in a few minutes and being able to draw a correlation between the 2 surveys. So it may be that, that there were just too many surveys this year, that our teachers felt like they had voiced their perception or how they were feeling, the climate, how they were feeling about the culture, some of the actions that are in place. And as a result, school perception survey came out afterwards, and so fewer teachers took that one.
Right, and I really believe that our teachers are providing feedback to the principal on a monthly basis. And you collect some people use a Survey Monkey to do it, some people just do the Post-it note system, but then the principals are addressing it, so they'll write up all of the comments and then they'll address it immediately, so they take the notes and they send them right back out to staff. So I think that we are more responsive more often.
Included at the elementary level, included in those monthly, what we call kind of dipsticks. And some of them were done every other month because one month they would do the dipstick, the next month they would come together in staff meetings and share the results. They'd find common themes. The building leadership team would find common themes on those anecdotal comments that were made. But included in those monthly or every other month dipsticks were questions about, here are the 3 areas we identified based on the perceptual survey. Here are the 3 areas we identified. How do you feel we're progressing along the way? So that it wasn't just a beginning of the year, mid-year, end year. They really could collect some data, anecdotal data throughout the year and make immediate changes if they felt that was needed.
So that sounds a lot better than possibly what this is. Is that fair to say?
Tell me what you mean by what this
Well, it
is.
seems like there's a lot of information you're gathering. It's a lot more intimate. It seems to be a little bit more connected to
The monthly or every other
So
month, yes.
It seems like that's a better indication of what's happening than what is in front of us right now.
But, yeah, and I would just add that Gwen will be getting into that later, because I think there's that more broader surveying that we did of staff, students, and parents that was more interconnected when we started on our journey with school perceptions 3 years ago, we didn't have anything in place. And I think having, at least having school perceptions provide us with a jump start, kind of set us in the right direction, and at least gives us some longitudinal data that we can track. But I guess I would say, rather than saying better, I would say different. And participation rates and time of year in which we administer the survey, I think are important things that we need to keep in mind. Giving 2 staff surveys back to back like we did to try to get them done so that we would have that information may not be the best approach, and so we might want to review our timeline for the administration and separate them out a little bit.
Agreed. I think if your ideal situation is that you have participation. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
Yep. We want to make sure we have voice of all stakeholders represented without making it onerous. And, you know, we've, I can say we've gotten much better the last 3 years, and Andrea and Ann have talked a little bit about how our principals are doing a much better job of checking in with their staff more frequently, which is fantastic. But then we kind of end up in a situation where something like this comes out and people are saying, well, you already asked me like 8 times this year how I feel. I don't need to tell you again because I've already told you. So how do we communicate the importance of a tool like this for longitudinal data while still making sure that we're doing those monthly check-ins with our staff to make sure they're doing okay? And it's finding that right balance.
Because that is what stood out for me when I was looking through it, was the dramatic difference in participation.
Yep.
I think I would offer is that part of our central office goal was to do the monthly updates to make sure that we had a really close pulse on what was going on in their schools, and that was part of our responsibility and our goal, to make sure we had that. I do think, and we need to really sit down, and I'd like to bring it back next month, a proposal of how to address the surveys, because we have, and you'll see a lot of really important data, and what we found is that, you know, people's voices are heard, but are we really hearing everything? And each of the 2 surveys, the school perception survey and the culture climate survey, actually measure some different things. They don't measure, you know, how students, staff, and parents feel about something. They measure what staff feels. So it's really looking at a couple of different variables. So I think we would like to drill deeper, knowing now what the outcomes of those surveys are, and have further conversation with the board.
Are you, Ann and Andrea, are you looking at the monthly school results?
Yes, so when we meet with our principals for leadership conversations, we bring those results, they share them with us prior, and we bring those results into the conversation.
And how often does that happen?
I can speak for at an elementary level, monthly or every other month. At some months, depending, you know, like in December, it may not be that we get to all, you know, every principal that we work with, so it might be over December and January. But what we do is we talk to them about, what are you doing about those results? How are you making the results, so the comments, how are you making them transparent to your team, not just your building leadership team, but how are you collaborating with your building leadership team to bring those results into a problem solution-oriented conversation at a school level with all stakeholders involved. And they do that during either staff meetings, or they may, instead of a collaborative learning team that week, they may bring in the results and have a whole conversation with the team.
Okay, so then I'm hearing that you try to do it every month with every principal?
Probably every 6 weeks, probably every 6 weeks for the group that I work with more. And the majority of the principals do it as a Google Doc, so it's a running, it's a running document that everybody on the staff have access to, so they're able to make comments, and then the principal is able to go in and maybe use a different color font and be able to do some response. But it's usually right around 6 weeks that. And if it's not even always able to be a face-to-face, it's always something that, you know, when I receive it, I can call and we can have a conversation that way. But the ideal is face-to-face, to sit down with it.
For some of the schools, they've done it every other month, the informal dipsticks, because 1 month they're doing the informal the 3 questions: what's going well, what are some challenges or barriers right now, what do we need to know at central office in order to better support you? And then underneath that, they have the 3 areas that they're working on for the perceptual survey. Then the next month, it came out that our own district one, not school perception, but the culture climate for our own district one. So that they did that one that month.
Is that a change from what had been, isn't that a change from what had been, I want to say directed, I guess? I thought there was an expectation that these be done monthly. Isn't that correct,
Yes.
Michelle?
I believe they're done at our staff meetings. That's a principal group.
Right.
It's a staff, they do it at staff meetings. It's a kind of an end of the staff meeting process, where if you're doing a Post-it note process, people are just able to do that, or they've added to a Google Doc, so.
Or a survey
So
that
they're
they're sharing with
doing
us.
it, probably they're doing it monthly, they are doing it monthly at their staff meetings. For us to be able to sit down and actually have a face-to-face, it's probably every 6 weeks we catch up with it. And for me, I shouldn't say that for Andrea, but that's about accurate for me.
At the elementary level.
Follow up, what's the participation rate in those monthly meetings?
That's good.
It's good.
That's good.
So not only do they present it at a staff meeting, they also then, because it's for the majority of for all of the principals that I work with, it's a Google form, so it's a survey. So then they send that survey out. So they're allowing time in the staff meeting, but then they also send that survey out so that if it's a traveling teacher or if it's a teacher at a doctor's appointment and couldn't be at that meeting, then they are able to take it, and there's a due date when it's due by. They also have a due date on when it's due to me. And what that does, it allows them to have a time line that they know it has to be completed, but then they know that it's shared with me so that I have time to look at it, or Anne has time to look at hers prior to us meeting with the principal.
So this definitely seems to be redundant then.
So what we're hearing we noticed within the first few months, fewer and fewer people were taking even the monthly one. And when we talk to principals, and we spend a lot of time in our schools, teachers were telling us, we have said it so many times. And so I do believe there is some redundancy, and that's what I believe we're working on with Dr. Langenfeld and the rest of our continuous school improvement team, to really look at how often are we surveying and what is the purpose, so that we can really use that information to drive continuous school improvement.
Would it be fair to say, and then this is my last comment on this,
Yeah.
that you're spending more time working on preparing the survey than reacting to the results of the survey to do the work to
So we are very fortunate in our district that we have great technology. We also have a research and accountability department, and they are supporting us with the logistics behind the creation or design. We're giving input on what it should look like, but it is done in a way that is very easily duplicated and given out and collected and analyzed. Now, anecdotal comments, of course, are different, but I have to tell you the anecdotal comments are what really are at the heart of change that needs to happen. And then you correlate it or triangulate it with more of a quantitative survey so that you can really start making informed decisions. But the qualitative surveys where they're really giving comments, where we can really dig deep with the principal who's digging deep with the leadership team is really critical.
And do we ever see those? Do we ever see those?
As a board member,
Yes.
I am not aware that you see the individual.
I mean, it doesn't sound familiar to me. I'm just asking if we.
No.
Because we don't, we don't supervise principals, so.
Oh, yeah, we see
it's-
this, so.
This is district-wide.
District-wide. It's a summative end of year.
Okay, but it doesn't have very good participation. I guess I'm just trying to understand the most efficient way to make sure that people are happy in the schools, and I'm just trying to understand, if we're not really getting a good turnout for this, why are we doing it?
So I agree with you, Rhonda, that what our participation rate is really what's going to help us think through the information that we receive. Because when you have low participation, we know that people who take surveys most often are either really happy with what's happening or are not happy at all. We have to provide a structure and a place, be in that routine that allows our teachers time and space to take it. Most of our principals have done that the last 3 years with this assessment, with this survey. I do believe it was that the timing of it, like Steve has said, that the other survey came out right around the same time.
So you have seen better participation in the past few years?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep, there are approximately almost 700 fewer people who took the assessment. The survey. We've been working with assessments this week, sorry. But I do have to tell you, I think you'll be enlightened when you hear from Gwen, because she's going to be able to talk about 3 different surveys that were given out to 3 different stakeholders, that you'll be able to really make that correlation between staff perception, parent perception, and student perception. And that's really critical information for us to have, because at a school level we can think, and as staff, think everything's going very well, but when we look at how is our community or our parents in our community believing we're doing then, or how are they feeling, then that's when you start to really go deeper.
And what was the participation rate on the parent-student survey?
That's
Gwen's going to be bringing that forward.
Coming up.
I
So,
don't have it off the top of my head, but you'll hear it.
Who's leading this discussion? Okay, thank you. I personally wouldn't want to see the individual information that teachers are providing their principals. As a board member, I think that could become intimidating. Second, help me out. The school climate surveys, those were initiated by the school board not too many years ago because we did not have information on what was going on out there.
correct.
So administration, they carried forward, but it was what the district or school board wanted to try to know what was going on by teachers, parents, and students, and how they felt about these various issues. And we spent back a while ago a lot of time and energy and money to get to this point. Now, obviously, you've got to go back and analyze it with your other surveys, with what's a timely way to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll continue on then.
Andrew has a question.
I guess for now, since we're on the slide with participation, this is just no way around it. This must go up above 70 for next year at least and stay there. This is our only consistent same questions over multiple years where you could detect a problem in the district, where a problem or improvement or standout success could be identified in particular buildings. It's also a survey that, and I've not been shy about certain criticisms I've had in the process of this survey either, but what it is consistent from year to year, and it's consistently given across the, it's not a state instrument, but many districts in the state use it, so although we don't get their information necessarily, we can look at how people across the state tend to respond to it, which is not the most important thing, but it's an indicator. Is this a question that tends to be answered low across the state, or is this a place where we're maybe standing out bad or standing out good? I would agree that I think it's survey fatigue from overlapping too much, but I don't think it can be. I think whatever you need to do, have an island of time without surveys on either side of it. Have some kind of a building incentive, not an individual incentive, because we want to stress the anonymity of this. We wouldn't want people to you couldn't really, I thought about that for a while. Could there be a way that someone could report that they did it, but you'd have to give them a code, which could make people wonder if you were tracking. So I think the better way to go would be some kind of a building, a fun little building incentive, if based on percentages, something like that. We just have to get this higher, because you spot certain things that are important and can see exactly where we were at from year to year with it. And there's a few places we've slipped, and there's a few places we've improved, but are still way below where we need to be. And there are some areas that we're doing well. So, but we just need to get that up. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously we want to work on that participation rate, and that's why I put that out there. And I appreciate the opportunity to have that discussion and conversation. And I know that we're having that at the district level and looking at how we can best move forward to increase participation year over year. So in moving on, the next few slides is really just basic demographic data. And as I said, I'm not going to read everyone to you, maybe just explain or highlight a couple of things on each slide. This slide just shows you the number of individuals at each school and what % of their population actually completed the survey. You can see that it ranges anywhere from a little below 1% at some schools to, or I'm sorry, this is the makeup of the respondents. So 8% of the respondents came from Preble, whereas at, let's say, the auxiliary building, 1% of the overall respondents, or 11 individuals that completed the survey, came from that site. Breakdown, obviously most of the individuals that filled out, about 50%, were classroom teachers. About 12% of the teachers that filled it out were traveling teachers, meaning they worked at more than one school. And almost 50% of the staff that completed the survey had been in the district for at least 10 years. It was split just about evenly between secondary teachers and elementary teachers. Of the educational specialists that filled it out, the majority of them were interventionists, but not a really strong majority. Oh. Of the support staff positions, about a third of the support staff positions that completed the survey were from the clerical group. And of the administrators, about half were school administrators, and then it was about evenly split between manager technical and district office administrators for the other 50%. So the survey is broken up into 3 parts with 4 subcategories under each. And again, I'll go through these slides and highlight maybe 1 or 2 things. And if you have questions, again, feel free to ask. The first subcategory that they get into is change readiness. When I talked to the vendor about what you could expect to see over time and where you should highlight your efforts, he said typically districts will focus on areas where there's a change of 0.2 or greater year over year. So it's not that you should ignore anything less than 0.2, but 0.2 is kind of that yellow flag, if you will, that you might want to pay more attention to that particular area. While there is nothing on this slide that reaches that threshold, you can see that our district is committed to making the needed improvements as they are identified. Did go down a little bit from 2017 to 2018. However, I would point out that it did actually go up 0.12 from 2016 to 2018. And you see that happen throughout these slides. It does seem like there is a dip from 2017 to 18, but when you look at the 3-year trend, you actually notice an increase from 2016 to 2018. So as with most data sets, you probably want a couple more years of collection before you really start to say there's a trend, because when you only have 3 points of data, you could draw that trend line, but I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we had 5 years of data to look at before I said there was a trend one way or the other.
Stephen, thank you, Laura. Did you ask school perceptions, and I apologize for asking this now. We successfully passed a referendum right before this particular survey was taken last year. Did you talk about that with school perceptions? Would that have, if people were feeling very positive, could that see a bigger bump than,
Yeah, when I
that
called and
become-
talked to Bill, one of the, because I was trying to make sense on, because obviously, as we spent a lot of time talking about this, the participation rate piece kind of stood out. And as we continued our conversation and talked about the results, one of the things that did come out was after you have a lot of positive press, scores tend to be higher and people strongly agree a lot more. And if you're having a situation where you're not seeing as much positive press, and last year was a difficult year for us in the media. There was some criticism over some different things that were happening, and that can have an impact on how people respond in these survey situations. So it's possible. Again, that would just be a hypothesis, but it could have had an impact on how people completed the survey.
Can I ask a question? So you
Yep.
say it's a hypothesis, but you must have that from somewhere. Where is that coming from?
So when I talked with Bill at School Perceptions, we talked about the whole range of possibilities, because I was trying to make sense. You'll notice that year to year throughout these slides, 2017 to 2018, there's a decline. But in 2016 to 2017, there was a big jump. And so naturally, your mind goes to that, okay, in 2017 when we completed this was right after passing a large referendum, and there was a really good positive vibe in the district. And this last year, we didn't have a similar experience to that. And so could that have had some kind of impact? And so that really, I can't say that comes from anything more than my conversations with him.
But we also don't have, definitely not the same amount of people participating to even really draw that conclusion. Is that fair? Yeah.
Well, and so, we could get into a conversation about statistical significance. I didn't have that conversation with Bill. Typically, survey companies will make hypotheses with a lower participation rate than 53%, which is what we have. Mm-hmm. So, again, it's not as high, and obviously the board would like to see it above 70% for next year, and I absolutely think that is what we need. We need to get back into that range. I would still say at 53%, given the distribution of the employees that completed the survey, it would be reasonable to make some hypotheses about what we're seeing up there. 53% still puts us at over half of our employees, and it's pretty evenly distributed amongst the different employee groups. So it's not like it's heavily favored towards one group or the other.
So, and this is, appreciate you stepping in, kind of taking the whole PowerPoint through here. Do we pay for, is it part of our fee for service that School Perceptions would come and present here?
I don't know that answer.
I don't know if that's part of the service.
It's part of their service.
Part of what they were unable to come tonight, and what we wanted to make sure is that we had this presented to the board, because schools are making school
Improvement plans.
So I'm not,
plans.
I'm not requesting that we rehash this to get a rep from School Perceptions here, but I trust if, that's just, my individual opinion, I'd respect if the board wished to have someone from School Perceptions come. I personally don't need it. Sir, I can trust that if that were asked for, they would be available to reschedule, because that's part of what we've paid for. although
Yeah.
I am not requesting that.
Yeah, but they would. I think last year, I don't know that there were a lot of questions.
No.
I think that was the other piece too. And I know that we wanted to be able to get the data out there so principals and their school improvement teams could really start using it. And we felt that it was important that the board see it first. But I'm sure they would come back and answer any additional questions. I'm sure they would. They've been very responsive.
But last year, the numbers were higher for participation, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So the next slide gets into student achievement, and Andrew had talked a little earlier about areas that are trending positively but still aren't where we would like them to be, perhaps. And I would say an example of that would be the very first question on here regarding student discipline being handled in a consistent manner by all staff. That's been going up progressively every year, but it's still at only 37% of our staff that strongly agree or agree. And obviously we would want all staff, or at least most staff, feeling like student discipline is being handled consistently throughout their buildings and throughout the district. So that would be, if I were to identify an area that we would want to keep working on, that would be one of those areas that I would highlight as an area we would want to keep working on, and despite the fact that we've already been making some progress. The next slide gets into engagement, and this has to do with staff engagement primarily. I guess for me, the highlight on this slide was the generally positive scores with regards to people feeling like what they're doing is valuable to the district. And almost 98% of the individuals that responded to the question about contributing to the success of our district responded favorably, saying they strongly agree that what they're doing is valuable. On the communication part, scores kind of in the mid-70s, and you can see that they're all down slightly, but again, a similar trend to what we had seen in previous slides, where from 2017 to 18 there's a slight dip, but if you look at 2016 to 2018, in all cases on this slide, you see improvement. So 3-year trend is a positive one. Okay, the next slide gets into department support and simply asks people to rate the level of support they receive from departments or groups. I guess I would say school board I wouldn't necessarily say is a department, but the different groups throughout the district, and you can see that ranges from a low on this slide of the district administration of 53% saying great or good, and a high of 90% for facilities, and our custodian and maintenance staff do an excellent job of maintaining our buildings. Work environment. It's always interesting to see the dichotomy on here, and I can honestly say I've been a teacher and administrator in this district, served in a variety of capacities, and I never feel like I have enough time to do my job effectively. So it's 56% that strongly agree or agree. 22 years now, I still can't say that I've ever said I have enough time to do the job as effectively as I'd like to do. But you can see, other than that one at 56%, most of these scores are in the mid-70s to 80s. A high level of satisfaction around our technology, which is great to see, because I know the school board has made a significant investment in technology over the years, and it's nice to see that that's paying some dividends. That 72% feeling valued by our community, that's still a really high score, but that's the lowest one on the slide, so I guess I'd just point that out, and that may be one that we want to dig into a little more deeply. Health and wellness, obviously we want to monitor our staff and make sure that they're taking care of themselves and doing what they need to do. Interesting, again, the lowest score on this slide is the pace of implementing new initiatives is appropriate at 56%. Change is always difficult, and the pace of change is always difficult for people. So that one is the lowest score on there. Nice to see that about 72% agree or strongly agree that they're getting enough sleep at night.
Getting better.
Development and recognition, scores on this one, again, pretty good overall, with over 2/3 of our staff, in most cases, saying they strongly agree or agree that they're getting the credit and the work they're doing is meaningful. Under compensation and benefits, always interesting to see the dichotomy, and this is one that's held true every single year of the survey. People are very satisfied with their benefits and not very satisfied with their pay. So the benefits are obviously one of the things that people feel is very important and are identifying that they strongly agree or agree that they're getting the benefits that they deserve.
When we see a high score for, a much higher score for my, we don't ask that my pay is competitive with jobs I find elsewhere. Huh? That's not one of them?
I
would suppose that if we were to, part of what would make pay fairer is if the structures existed across the state to truly, be able to reward people for the amount of work done. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine if you went to many schools, you would probably see that as one of your lower ones, just if you look at what's happened over the years and how things have changed. So it'd be interesting to see. I'm glad to see that our staff is finding the benefits are competitive. That's a question we've asked as a board, and we've asked HR for updates and making sure where are we at with our salaries. Are we staying right in the mix with other players? But I would just point that out, that I would think that's something that might be low across all of the state, and for a good, truthful reason for these jobs.
Yep, but at least from a perception standpoint, our staff really do appreciate the benefits in the district. Yes. On culture, again, scores are really relatively strong, with a low of 72% for adequate opportunities to participate in the decisions that affect me. I mean, to have 72% strongly agree or agree with that is, I think, pretty good. The next slide gets into looking at schools' academic expectation, and results have been pretty consistent year to year. In 2016, 75% of staff indicated that they felt like their school's academic expectations were just right. Last year it jumped up to 77%, this year it dipped to 73%. So kind of been in that mid-70s range year over year. From a building leadership standpoint, again, the results seem to be relatively strong, stable year over year, and indicate that, at least from a staff perception standpoint, they appreciate and trust the leadership in their building. Again, similar trend on this slide with regards to what we've seen in some of the previous slides, where results did go down a little bit, 2017 to 2018, but for the most part, there was either flat or an increase from 2016 to 2018. In looking at district administration, again, dipped, and this is where we've hit two questions that would have hit that threshold, at least according to the staff at School Perceptions.
Excuse me, Steve,
yep.
Would you go back to department leadership, please?
Yep.
Who was this asked of? Because the N on these are very low. We're just in the hundreds, 140 something to 200. So who was this asked of?
I will look into that and get back to you.
That would be people here.
Yeah. So the question was, the N size here is lower than on many of the other slides. And Sandy, do you have?
That would be asked of people here evaluating their department.
Okay.
In central office?
Correct.
Okay.
They roughly parallel in a building. People would have, these are very similar questions, my principal.
Correct.
But this is,
So this must be administrators, technical and managerial.
Anybody.
Anybody.
Anybody at central office?
Anybody in central office.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Sandy. All right, district administration, again, that slide that I was mentioning, a couple questions here with a 1-year dip of over that 0.2 threshold that we may want to explore. Although I would say that it's remained relatively flat 2016 to 2018, and in some cases has actually increased from 2016 to 2018. And looking at the school board, again, one question on here that hits that threshold, but if we compare it 2016 to 2018, there's actually an overall increase in the average score. Overall satisfaction, again, one question on here that hit that 0.2 threshold, still at 80% strongly agree or agree, and was an increase from 2016 to 2018. So again, a little bit more about that school perceptions, staff engagement indexes. There are 12 indexes, and those are sorted into 3 categories that have to do with people, processes, and place. And so they pick out specific questions, and then they create a series of indexes of staff engagement. Under the people category, they look at control over work environment, health and wellness, workload, and affirmation. Under place, do people feel like they have the right tools to do the job, the team to do the job with, a culture of educational excellence, high expectations, and trust in their building leadership. And process, what does the public and parent support look like? How is the planning and improvement process implemented, and what kind of feedback exists? Do they trust district leadership, and how do they feel about being communicated with? And so you can see each of those different index scores compared to the previous 2 years for those 12 different areas. Again, one question on here hits that threshold of two of them, I'm sorry, hit that threshold of 0.2. The last 2 on here, public, parent support and trust, and district leadership. However, as has been true in many of the other slides, while there is a 2017-2018 dip, there's a 2016 to 18 increase. So, in my opinion, more data would be required before you would make any broad generalizations here. And that concludes the presentation from School Perceptions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Stephen. As you heard from Anna and Andrea, as Dr. Stramp comes up to the table, this particular survey came out of the fact that we wanted to have feedback for the board and do a comparative analysis of how students, staff, and parents all feel about the same indexes around, we began with safety and culture climate, and then moving into teaching and learning as well, and to try to get a broader look throughout the school year of where things are working collectively well together, people see it the same way, but also where those disconnects are, and recognizing that engagement and in addition to culture, climate, and school safety is also part of that. And I know Gwen's going to just kind of refresh everyone's memory of where this came from, and we'll go forward with the results. So thank you, Gwen.
Oh, you're welcome. Good evening. I'm Dr. Gwendolyn Stramp. I am your District Director of Research and Program Evaluation. So thank you for round 2 on the different survey information that we're looking at tonight. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the process and the analysis conducted in the area of school climate during the 2017-2018 school year. So we start a presentation with our education learning system, and I thought for the benefit of our audience that may not have been with us in March when we took our first introduction into our school climate data, that I would fill in some of the blanks and kind of go over some information. And one of the things that we do in program evaluation is you really want to make sure you know what your subject is that you're measuring or what you're analyzing. And you want to see, is that going to be simple, like one answer, one stakeholder? Maybe it's going to be somewhat complicated. Maybe there's 2 or 3 ways it could go. Or very complex because you have a lot of individuals. And based on the amount of participation, it's going to help you to see how big the project is going to be that you're working with. Well, when we look at an educational learning system, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. But when we look what would be behind it or under the hood, I think it's good for us to remember that an educational learning system is multifaceted. It carries our mission, our vision, all of our academic priorities, our values of engagement, equity, and excellence. It is all of the board work that we do. It's all of our governance, our policies, our procedures. And it brings forward our curricular standards, our beliefs, and our pedagogy. In other words, this educational learning system is our culture in action. So we are measuring the experience of when people come in contact with our culture, when we're moving forward with it. So now you take something like school climate from 3 stakeholders, and this suddenly becomes pretty complex. We have a lot of data that's coming forward, and my goal is to bring to you the information in a way that it's consumable, that we can get down to, well, where do we start our work? So that's what I want to bring to you tonight. So when we start our work, we start with defining school climate, and we started our work with that last September. At a school board retreat, we were looking at data, and we brought forward this school climate model that we researched through the literature. And the resources to the literature are provided at the end of the superintendent's letter, so you can go in and see the same resources that I work with. I try to provide you with the most recent and most relevant resources, but I will say you may find some that go a little past 4 or 7 years, because research doesn't always follow a nice cycle and come up every 4 to 7 years, or longitudinal studies do not always come up when you want them to. So do know I tried to give you the most recent, but you might find some that are a little older. But when we came to the board, we said, would we be interested in this type of school climate model? Would we be interested in pulling some data on that? And we received approval to move forward with that. So once you get your information together, then you want to come together with a definition. So the definition that we're borrowing from the National Center of Safe Supportive Learning Environments is, school climate is a broad, multifaceted concept that involves many aspects of the student's educational experience. A positive school climate is the product of a school's attention to fostering safety, and you can see that's one of the dimensions we have in our model. Promoting a supportive academic, disciplinary, and physical environment, and that's captured in our model. And encouraging and maintaining a respectful, trusting, and caring relationship throughout the school community. So once you can accurately and adequately define what it is you're looking for, you know what your subject is that you're measuring, and you have a working definition, you start looking at your model and putting it together, and when you have your model, it should reflect your mission. So let's see if we were able to hit the mark. Because under the model, there's going to be an assumption, so this was what we were working with when we set out for our survey. The assumption is based on the school climate dimensions that we can measure the experience that is taking place in our school community as we develop the social, emotional, and citizenship competencies of our students as they are attending a safe and supportive school where our students feel engaged and inspired to learn as our students develop an open mindset for learning and resiliency to interact in a diverse world. So in that assumption for under our model, you should have heard our school mission or our district mission statement. If you didn't hear that in this, then we were measuring something that doesn't align with our work. So the first steps when you are preparing to set out to conduct a survey, and I heard many of those questions and that information that you were asking about our school perception survey, is to ensure that what we are measuring aligns with the work we are doing. Once we have our pieces together, we set out on a survey process. You can see that's a basic plan, do, study, act process for action research. As I said, we came to the Board of Education a year ago and received approval to move forward. Once we had that approval, the next step was to look at, would you host this survey internally or externally? And we looked at both methods. From what we could learn externally, it was going to be about $40,000 the first year to start the survey. That would have been the design, the delivery, and the analysis. And you'll notice in the analysis that the more comment boxes you have, the more the cost is going to go up. And we knew somewhere along the way we'd want feedback through comment boxes. The opposite, and then every year after that, it looked like it would be like $16,000 to $18,000. The opportunity that we had internally to host this was through some survey software that we had purchased. It's not some survey software, or I should say the Remark survey software, that we had purchased the year prior for $3,000 with an annual upgrade of about $1,000 to $1,500. The decision was to host it internally and to work with building our question set. We looked at several different surveys. As I brought to you last March, I said we worked with the Madison Metropolitan School District, and they helped us a great deal so that we could start with our pieces, getting everything together, and our first data collection was in November 2017. The result from that I brought to you last March. What we learned from our fall survey was we had a guide for survey implementation. We had information on the performance of the survey statements. We identified survey methods that needed to improve. And we had baseline dimension scores for our relationship and safety information or dimensions. At that time in March, I said we were going back out again in just a week or so to conduct our spring survey. That's the data that I'll bring you tonight. I do not have the comment information prepared for that. I'm holding on those comments to put together with the comments that we are receiving from our end of the year survey. In March, I also said we'd go out again in the end of the year and do a climate and satisfaction combination. That is open right now and that will close in another week. I will bring all of those comments together with themes and saying whether they're positive and negative, and those will be available, I'm tentatively saying, probably about by the end of September. The way to process every comment is to read and process every comment. Everything gets read. You can verify your coding through computer coding, but you still have to read every comment to make sure everything's being handled the way it should be. So that will be information that will come in the future. Otherwise, we are really at stage 3, understanding our findings and getting into that action planning. And you heard a great example this evening of the action planning that has taken place around the school perception survey. And we have a goal to have that same level of action planning take place along our survey that we have for our school climate. For participation, we had lower participation in the spring than we had in the fall. And for the same reasons that you had already discussed this evening, I would say that that's the same thing we experienced In our spring climate survey, we had a nice participation of staff. This survey came out before the school perceptions, and that might have lent to some confusion about how many surveys or which survey do I participate in. People will ask me, how do you know this is reliable? How do you know this is trustworthy? Well, we do the same thing that they do in elections, where they will do polling or exit polling, and they will say, we predict such and such candidate will win within plus or 2 percentage points. So we do the same thing. We know the population that could participate, the sample that did. We build the confidence interval, and then we know what part of the population we can apply this answer to. We do it for each of the questions, and then we have a confidence level, and our confidence level is really high. It's at 99%, which is big for a qualitative survey. And what this brings to us is that if we had a similar survey given to the same group with similar statements at the same time of year, I'm very confident that this population is going to answer similarly on that other tool if it's a reliable tool. In your resources, I did that comparison between parallel statements between this survey and school perceptions, and yes, it is reliable. People answer the same way, which makes sense because satisfaction is an output of your experience with the climate. So yes, we can tell you what our level is for confidence and our interval, and we have that for school and student, or pardon me, for parents and students. We do, or pardon me, for staff and students. For parents, because we are asking for 1 survey per household based on the youngest child, we know the number of unique families approximately in the district. I do not have that confidence interval calculated for that. But we did have 3,700 families or parents in the fall, 2,000 in the spring. When I came to you in March, I said we needed to do more to get a diverse voice from our parents into our survey feedback. We said we would be working with our family engagement coordinators, and they did a marvelous job of going out and canvassing and working with our parents to show the importance and bringing that forward. So we did have improvement in our parent voice.
Can I just ask?
Yes, please.
But when you look at it, it's 16% of 12,000 families. And the fall was 35% of 12,000 families. That's pretty dramatic.
Right. I agree. It's not optimal, and we need to do more, and that actually comes up in my recommendations. What I did see, what's positive, though, is that we had movement in the area that was a concern from the get-go. So knowing with each survey that we work through, we're going to get better at that. And also when we have the action steps that come out of somebody giving us their feedback, that improves performance also. So I agree. It's not where it needs to be. It's a start, though. And the rest of the work is in our hands to keep moving it forward. So what I do for you then is, after doing a dimension score and also doing a gap agreement on each of the statements for each of the stakeholder groups, doing a correlation coefficient, looking at variance and looking at the standard error measurement and a descriptive, just a basic distribution on each of the questions, I'm bringing to you, to condense it, to the themes of shared agreement and the themes of less agreement and where we need to do our work. So I'm saving you going through all of those pieces of data and getting down to really what do we take, what's our takeaways from the survey. So our shared themes of agreement in the area, in the dimension of relationships, across all 3 stakeholder groups, we had 13 parallel Likert statements so that we could come out with a dimension score and say, where do we have shared agreement or where do we have work to do? Our families feel accepted, our families feel respected, our students enjoy attending the school, and our employees enjoy working at the school. That we know is with confidence throughout the 3 stakeholder groups. Under the dimension of teaching and learning, achievement is encouraged, was agreed upon, and that the school would be recommended, or the person would stay at that school. The school staff was asked, would you stay, if you had a choice, would you stay at this school? Safety, there was agreement that there are established behavior expectations. And when you think about where we started the school year with the rollout of the behavior expectation handbook and making it very clear that this is the direction that the district is going with behavior as far as an outline of what they could expect, it makes sense that people would agree and say, yes, there are established behavior expectations. And physical safety is seen positively. Areas where we have need for continuous improvement, where we have work to do. Under teaching and learning, students feel important in the classroom. For teaching and learning, social and emotional learning was a concern across all 3 stakeholder groups. Under teaching and learning, parents hear about the good things students complete. All 3 stakeholder groups said, or they agreed less to that statement. Personal property and behavior consequences are fair for everyone under safety are 2 areas to work in. Now I'll go back to the first one and I'll talk about why there isn't X's all the way across. Pardon?
Okay, what is the actual criteria for something to receive an X versus not? Like how do we actually, what gets you to that? So this is, I understand condensing, but this is ultra condensed. So how do we get an X?
So all of that information is actually presented at the end of the superintendent's letter as resource links. So you have the opportunity to see all of the calculations and everything that was done. But to answer your question, this was based on the dimension score. So if the threshold was less than a 3, meaning 75% agreement was not attained, is number 1. Number 2, each statement for each stakeholder group, there was a gap to agreement analysis done. So that was looked at to see what are the themes that are coming up that we have less agreement. 3, I did a correlation using Spearman-Rowe to see where do I have the greater strength. So for example, in the previous slide, there was statistically significant correlation. And we do have the numbers to conduct a power analysis. So if we had 1 million examples, we would be able to be reasonably sure that we're going to have the same effect. It would be a medium to small effect size actually with the numbers that we have. So looking at the numbers several different ways, plus you'll see in the data that there is a descriptive analysis under the dimension comparison composite score information. So one is just the parent, student, and stakeholder with a histogram, and then there is another copy of that presentation which then gives mean, standard error of measurement, variance, correlation, covariance, and I think count and percentages on there also. So there's several different ways that you can look at it to see, and you will find that as you put all the pieces together, these are the areas that had the least agreement, and I would say probably, a weaker showing, if you want to say that. Does that help,
Well,
Mr. Becker?
Okay, so, not really. So, I understand that there, you're looking for where there's correlations. So if we have on the one where people seem to be feeling good about things, then you have all 3 groups that are statistically significantly good. I'm still not quite understanding what gets you that mark of good. So it starts off as a 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, I understand that averaging Likert scales is not a not a preferred practice, and it sometimes is often done as a necessary evil in social science, because you can't, how do you really average that? But okay, so if we do that, and just to keep it simple, if we had if we had half the people, if we had 2/3 of the people give it a soft agree and 1/3 of the people give it a soft disagree, and no one feels strongly, then we've got a a high twos. Is that going to get the X, or does that not get the X? Or is it not going to create a high 2 because of how we rescale it?
So in the resources, there's information on the building of composite scores, and there's one piece of literature in particular that you might want to look into, and it's how you use, instead of, as you say, the Likert and the mean and averaging them out, how you change that to a dichotomous score and then build a composite score from that. So I think that will be helpful. When we're looking at the dimension score, that is a set of questions that help us to see in that dimension of teaching and learning, how did that perform? There's also available in the resources, because you might be wondering, how does that internal consistency work with the questions? So I've given you the data for a Cronbach Alpha that was done on each of those, and in my recommendations I'll talk about the survey set of questions that probably performed a little less rigorous than I would like to see. But to your point of where you're looking at, there's also the information then under the descriptive statistics that I think you might like the information under the covariance. And you'll see there, it comes out very nicely. For each of the questions, when you look at the mean, you can see where there is tight agreement between the stakeholder groups. You see the mean is around maybe a 2.3 or a 2.4, and the covariance is maybe sitting at a 50 or 60. And when you see the questions where there's great variation, that coefficient of variation spreads out. But I will say on the students, you do have to use that with caution, because we have so many grade levels that are being represented. So that one tends to fluctuate a little bit more. But you can see it between the mean and the covariance. So maybe, to give you the time to go through and look at that, and if there's any questions, you can send them to me and I can come back around. But going through the information several times to be confident that we have hit the set of questions that are an entry point. I'm not saying this is the solution or this is the answer, but it's our glimpse into where we have some work to do.
So is there somewhere that it's available, here's the questions and here's the 4 3s, the 2s and the 1s for them?
Yes.
Okay, that's in there, that's in the...
Yes, that would be under the link to the, it's number 9 in the appendix, and it's the agreement gap tables. And that will then show all the calculation for that. And what you're seeing, yes, I think I did load up the file so you can even see the formula behind it. And then there's a description that I provided for extra information. I believe I uploaded to talk about how that is calculated, how the composite score is calculated. So that would be, oh yes, it's under the dimension comparison composite score information. It's going to be included in that. So I tried to put as much information as I could together for you to give you the mini tab summary sheet that is provided for everything, for like the Cronbach alpha calculation, for the item analysis, for the covariance, so that you could go through and see, so you can feel confident that the areas of most need have been highlighted, because we have to start with a beginning set. Because when you start working with one, something else is going to tip and change. Things are going to evolve as this work starts taking place.
Brenda? So, statistics aside, on this, the fact that, so these are areas where people felt they had low scores, they felt they needed.
Yes, we had less agreement here showing a gap, yes, that this.
But in general, they also just have lower, I mean, they didn't rate these as highly. In other words, students feel important in the classroom, that got low scores.
Yes, and.
And so then why, if they got low scores, and then what does it mean that only the student has an X and the parent and school staff don't?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing me back to that. I appreciate that. And so when you go through the literature, and I do believe I presented this in the appendix for you, and we will often say those closest to the work are the ones to ask about how to improve it. You will find that same phenomenon take place in survey work, that the stakeholder group that is closest to the statement is going to have the best critical eye about that. So I thought it was very interesting to find that for our parents and school staff, they did not show the lack of agreement or lesser agreement as we found in the students, and this was elementary and secondary. So the other two groups, it's not there, and that's why it's important to have all the stakeholder groups when you're doing school climate. Yes?
If it's not there, then it means that the student group rated it less than 75% positive. Did the parents and the school staff rate it higher than 75%?
They did.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then at first,
Yes.
and then the personal property one, the students were less concerned about the safety of their personal property because they didn't get an X.
Yes.
But the parents and school staff were more concerned by scoring it lower than the 75%.
Yes, and when you go back and look at the individual statements and the covariance I was just mentioning for Mr. Becker, that you will see that the students really for the personal safety, or pardon me, personal property, are right in that range too. It's just that wide range of grade levels, it's going to stretch that out. So maybe a student in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade doesn't have the same, won't answer this question the same way as somebody who's in grade 9, 10, 11, or 12. But, so I don't want that to be interpreted that they didn't have concern, or that they weren't saying that this is something that is on their radar screen too, that they're not agreeing with. It's just, it didn't come out as strong as the parent and school staff, and I'm thinking pretty much for the same reason as we had the other. It's that one closest to the statement has the most invested and the most critical eye on that. The last statement is the one that I think we will be seeing for several years if we decide to keep moving forward with this survey instrument. That question asks about behavior, consequences, fairness, and everyone. So we have the potential for 20,000 to 30,000 individuals to participate in this survey. We had somewhere between 10 to 12 between our fall and spring administrations. When you bring, before I showed you the learning system, and then I had school climate, now you go out one more ring and think about all of the beliefs, the values, the perceptions, the goals that each individual person has around a statement like behavior, consequences, and fairness. So we know that one is going to probably always be on our list. It's going to take a lot to work through that and find out where everything needs to be. What do people want to see? So it's very interesting, and I think this is a nice set of questions. I shouldn't say nice. It's a valid and reliable set of questions to look into as a place to start doing our work. So my recommendations, if we decide to go forward with this for our next school year, it's hard to believe we're already putting 2018-19 on there. It just seems like we're still right in the middle of our current year work. I would say let's continue to use this set of survey statements. They performed well. Based on the discussion that you've already had this evening, I would say let's go to a one time of year administration. Go in the spring. Coincide with parent-teacher conferences so we can get as much of that bandwidth of people thinking about school, and our school and family engagement coordinators can help out. From the item analysis, the statement set around teaching and learning performed well, but it did not perform as well as the other statement sets for all the stakeholder groups, which the item analysis tells you then that you have some statements that either the flow of the questions isn't hanging together, or the wording of the questions is just not helping the participant to get the focus and to code what their experience is. So we know we have a little bit more work there to make that perform a little bit better. We need to continue to review our methods to increase our stakeholder participation, just as we've you mentioned this evening, Mrs. Sitnikow, just as you said, it's not optimal. We don't have enough parent voice yet. We need to keep looking at our methods, and I think one time of year administration around a significant point in the school year, such as parent-teacher conferences, could be very helpful in bringing that forward, but we have more work to do.
So what are the methods of, getting this out there to families? How is that happening?
So from our communication standpoint that we have that we've put into place for these two administrations, we have been doing the school messenger to contact parents and parents of the school staff. It goes through our staff scoop information, and we also ask the principals to talk about that. And we have it on the web page. It's on, I believe, the Facebook page.
It's on social
So we've
media.
been doing more of the calling and letting people know of that. I'm trying to think if in the beginning we probably had, in the first time in the fall, we asked the schools to put in their school newsletter. In the spring, we had, with intention, the family engagement coordinators that went to specific events. We held the survey open longer to encompass various events that we knew were going on. For example, we had a parent event scheduled for one of those evenings when we had a lot of snow. So then that was rescheduled for May, so we actually extended the time that the survey was open in order to allow for that parent group, because we knew we would have really good parent participation. So we're starting. We need more, so if there's suggestions on what we should do beyond that, definitely we'll open to them and figure that out and see how we can keep growing each year.
Gwen, I think that if I could also add, I think there's opportunity to learn what other districts who do this particular survey have done for participation for many years. And I think that also is maybe a change in something new, and people don't recognize it's for them. So we can do a better job of that. The other thing that is very interesting is I met with Lori Blakesley last week to figure out exactly what we have seen the biggest response from, and it's interesting. It's electronic billboards we're getting a fair amount of feedback from, and we're not sure what we're getting from our Facebook pages. So it's really Lori's working on that because we believe that we need to improve, just as the board has pointed out tonight on both surveys.
A lot of good work is underway. And there's different opportunities through parent-teacher organizations, the results being posted on their school websites. I mean, there's different opportunities to increase awareness that the information exists, which then maybe that's where somebody would like to participate. You've been asking questions throughout the presentation, but I'll offer up again if there's any other questions that you might have, or any other information I can prepare for you or send to you. Mr. Becker?
Okay, so I think I got the formula kind of worked out as to how this gets collapsed down, except for one thing.
Okay.
It looks like we probably weren't anywhere close to a situation where only where fewer than 25% would agree to a statement. It looks like that's not territory that we were in, at least from anything I could see this.
You are correct, and the results were in the board letter, the index scores. You are correct. There was none.
Just for purposes of understanding the math to it, though, if there was 100% of agreement points, which would actually require everyone to strong agree for that to happen, which isn't possible. But if you did, the only way to get a 4 would be to have all strong agrees, just like if you average 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I get that. But a score of 1 represents 25%. So theoretically, when doing the numbers,
25 to 50, right. 1 point such and such might be in there too.
Okay, so if you had that situation where not even 25% agreed, you would actually get down between 0 and 1, or is it recoded with 0 becoming 1 and 4 staying 4? Right, because you say the minimum score is 1, but then really does 1 represent 25% and?
Well, so not to get into it too in depth, but to say that there actually is a true 0 and there's a true non-participation. So it's going to, because it's positive and negative, it's dichotomous, okay? And 0 stands for neutral, so we're not even putting the neutral pieces in there. So 0 sits with neutral. So it's going to have to be a 1, but let's put some examples together. I can do that for you. But 2, that's why we have 2 or 3 other measures to say when this happens with this set, now what is causing this to happen. Plus, remember, it's a dimension, so it's going to have 4 or 5 questions to it. So to get something that low means that you had all the questions performing really low to get that dimension score. Not to say that we can't have low scores individually, but that is done on an agreement to gap statement, and we also have our covariance. We have 2 or 3 different measures.
Okay, so let's just say 10% of people.
That it would be really, really low, like, yes, something.
It would be 1 point something, or would it become 0 point something because it was even below a quarter?
Well, you know what? I will run some examples for you, and then we will know for sure. The good news was I didn't have to do that.
That's good.
And
just a few, a few. If 20 people answered this way, and so many, just
run some models for you so you can see. Sure.
Just not something that should take more than a few minutes. Just here's a few little samples and how it would work out. Thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome.
Are there any more questions? I think that completes it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Yep, we're done. All right. Next is our superintendent's update, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Langenfeld.
Thank you so much. Just to update the community and those listening of the upcoming meetings. July 23rd, we have a special board meeting at 5 o'clock here in the boardroom. August 6th is another special board meeting at 5:15. August 6th, we also have teaching and learning work session at 5:30. Immediately following is the organizational support work session. August 7th is a special board meeting with a closed session, and August 20th is a regular board meeting. That's the August calendar. As we move forward, and the next item I have is the charter school grant, and I would invite Associate Superintendent Vicki Beyer, along with Principal from John Dewey Academy for Learning, Jen Agamite, to speak. And as they approach, I want to talk a little bit. We applied for 2 charter grants for planning and implementation, and the first grant that we did, we were awarded one of the 2 grants. It had a value of $900,000 to plan and implement for the Northeast Wisconsin School of Innovation. And it really is an important model that we're looking forward to look at some very dynamic and personalized approaches to learning, proficiency-based education, and really helping students move forward. The students in the academy will be part of that. And in addition to that, we will start and add elementary, middle school students in grades 7, 8, and 9 initially, and then roll that up and increase that. It is a partnership with the Northeast Wisconsin Technical College and the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, and we anticipate Eventually, it will be a 714, so students will be able to not only earn college credit through our turbocharge efforts, but also potentially have the opportunity to complete an associate's degree or more as a result of their participation in this program. So a lot of work yet to be done. There is a governance board that will be working and has already started. Jason Johnson, that many of you have met, who works in the academy right now in the district, will be providing leadership in that area as well and moving that forward. But we also felt it was important to start a conversation with the Board of Education about the vision that Jen brought forward in the charter grant along with the team to talk about expanding John Dewey. Currently, we serve 8th, 9th, and 10th, and 11th, and 12th graders, but we talked about the importance of 7th and 8th graders getting hooked in, and possibly even 6th graders, many who would benefit tremendously from a smaller environment and project-based learning. So we thought we would have the discussion and bring that forward just as part of a discussion, and if there was interest in moving a proposal forward, we would do that in the future. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking the Board of Education for your support on the charter school grant. We're very grateful to have been awarded it, and as I told many of you individually, we're striving to not let you down, because we know that if we do this right, all of our students will benefit by this alternative pathway. As Superintendent Langenfeld mentioned, the middle school group is one that we'd identified in alternative ed that we just didn't have enough to support those that the traditional school setting just wasn't working out for them. And part of Jen's proposal was to start reaching out to those kids. So I'm going to ask her to talk a little bit about that and future plans for John Dewey.
Thank you. Well, one of the reasons that our team started having the conversation about expanding to include 6th and 7th grade is because we have had some family requests, families who've come in with their 6th and 7th graders to tour our school, and unfortunately we just weren't able to accommodate their needs at that time, since we are currently an 8th through 12th grade school. And we've also been branching out into the online learning. And last year, I was able to reach out to families who had left the district or who were planning to leave the district to pursue online learning elsewhere, and bring back 18 of those families. And there were a lot of other names on that list of students in 6th and 7th grade. So that's also something that we've been considering, that we would like to expand so that we can grow both the project-based learning program as well as the online program, especially for special education students.
You contacted how many families that were leaving?
I don't have the exact number of how many I contacted, but I was able to get 18 to return.
That had already left.
That already made that decision, and then when you informed them of that you can get these options without leaving, you had 18 families come back?
Yes.
We set a goal of 10, so she exceeded.
Mr. Becker, I know you had reached out after you heard about the grant and recognized that John Dewey. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry, I was I was kind of far away from it. No, that's okay. I was just so it's probably good that I asked the question again. I was asking just clarifying that by asking the question of families who left Green Bay for an online, presumably an online charter school or online program of another district, and you were saying that you got 18 families back, and that's not just families who were talking about maybe doing it, it was actually families who made a decision for another district because of online programming. You talked to them about what we had here, and then 18 families returned to GBAPS.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'd like to add about the online component that's unique to what Jen and her team are offering, is that it's not just providing the student with the online and then we hope they are successful. It's actually bringing the student in and you're doing some coaching and meeting with them on a regular basis.
That's correct. So Initially, students feel as if they would like to just stay home to do their work, and if that is what they truly wish to do, we honor that, but we also encourage them to come into our building at least once per week. And once we get them in the building and they see the type of relationships that students have with one another and between staff and students, they begin to come more often. And we see that the more students are with us in our building, the more successful that they are. So it's something that we'd like to continue.
If I remember correctly, of this year's graduates, you had, was it probably 2 or 3 who probably would have told you at the beginning they intended to be online only?
That's
and
correct, 2 or
then
3.
Two of the 3, at least by the end, were full-time more or less?
Yes.
And the one that wasn't stayed with the online but still did some school activities, including the weekend, is that right?
Yep.
Yes, so.
Yeah, one of the 3 did most of her work at home, but she still came in for special activities.
And Trees for Tomorrow too, right?
Yes.
I think so. So that's significant. That's everyone, that's kids with different needs, finding that, 2 of them finding that maybe I didn't really need, maybe I really didn't want to be online, I just needed to find the right place.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had one say, I still kind of like to do the schoolwork part online, and succeeded and graduated, but nonetheless found some things, including taking a bit of a risk and going to a 3-night out-of-town thing. So that was really significant to hear about that at the graduation. It's also good to hear about bringing families back into the district when they learn that we have things that maybe people didn't know that we had. So thank you.
So since the press conference, can you hear me? Okay. Since the press conference, there's been, I've had a lot of questions, a lot of calls, people asking, so I have a few questions, bear with me. First, people are wondering, the conversation was, we're going to have a school. So the questions that I've been receiving were, first of all, is this an actual location on its own? Is it just, it sounds like there's an extension of John Dewey, correct? Or that's what you're looking to do? Because it's, okay. So is it going to be?
These are two different schools.
Right.
2 different charters.
Exactly. So my question is on, then with the $900,000, and this is what people were wondering, is there a school that is, picked out? Is there a building location? Is there something you have in mind? Because I know the money's for planning.
No location has been determined this time. Location for the building has not been determined at this time.
Did you hear that?
Okay, and then another question was to build capacity in this building that will be determined at another time. Are students going to self-select? Are they?
Yes,
okay.
correct, yeah.
How do we plan to, I guess, get this word out about this other than relying on media? Because that's not obviously working so well.
That's actually part of the planning year.
Okay. And then there was a board that was discussed as far as a governance board. Where's the accountability? Does it lie solely with that board? How does this operate?
Very good. The majority is with that governance board for the charter, but ultimately this board will be signing off on things.
Okay, so will they be having meetings like we are typically, and then something is passed to us?
Correct. There'll be communication between the 2 board presidents.
Okay, but we won't be given any sort of information from that board itself, the whole board?
That most likely will come from myself, Jason Johnson, and Jen. We will continue to provide updates to the board. That's a requirement of the charter grant.
Okay.
It's the accountability piece is very strong. So we need to ensure that we are doing the right thing for our students, and you're part of the oversight of that.
And then another question was, how are they, how is it determined who's on that board, that governance board?
Thank you. I'm not sure.
The makeup of, can you hear me back there? The makeup of the charter board is part of the charter contract that the charter has with the school board and the governance council of the charter. So the JDAL governance board is made up as determined by that JDAL contract that the John Dewey Academy of Learning governance board has with the school board, and the school board signs off on that contract. In addition, there's an annual report that John Dewey Academy of Learning is required under the contract to give to the school board, and that's provided at an open meeting as well.
Okay. But how are the members of that board determined, and how are they chosen?
That will be negotiated in the contract.
Okay. Is it done publicly?
We do have some members.
That was a
already.
question I was asked, so.
Yeah, we do have some members already. We were looking for a cross-section of community leaders.
Okay.
So I do have names that, it's not a full board yet. When the board meets, which they have a meeting coming up next week, they'll determine the rest of the placements.
So it will be at some point, obviously.
And all of the governance council meetings are required to be posted as well under the Wisconsin Public Records Law.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Wisconsin Public Meetings Law.
Okay. That's it?
So are you
Thank you.
asking for our input tonight, and what questions do you have for us in terms of either John Dewey or the charter, the district, or the?
Tonight's about JDAL.
Oh, okay.
We're asking for the board to allow for an expansion, moving to the middle school, expanding the middle school programs.
I think if I could add, I think one of the things that also really factors in is the space and facilities. As Ms. Sitnikow talked about where the new charter school would go, where also is John Dewey going. And we have obviously the boundary committee just finished and identified space in our schools right now. We had discussion prior to the referendum about relocation of John Dewey within one of our schools. So it's really going and making sure that if we need to go hand in hand, if we expand the number of students who could potentially participate in John Dewey, we would want to make sure that we had addressed their space needs as well. And also the conversation looking future-wise too, should the charter school be also in the same space with a separate identity of John Dewey, where does that go? So just really looking at all of those components is really what we'd like to do, is explore more deeply. Obviously, there will be need to be curriculum that's written and things like that. So this isn't something that could be done tomorrow, but we wanted to start the conversation with the Board of Education and then bring back a proposal perhaps in August to go deeper.
Do we have to so that right now John Dewey is written to be 120 students, and so we haven't had nearly that many. Can we incorporate 6th and 7th in without raising that number?
Yeah.
So the question is, do we have to rewrite the charter to include the 2 new grades, or can we just bring them in knowing that we have space for 120 students and we have room in that school right now?
Does that need to be?
We do need to amend the charter to include 6th and 7th grade, and then there are also some components required from the Department of Public Instruction.
Okay.
I wonder, perhaps Michelle, if you would just kind of review again what it means to be an instrumentality, a charter school instrumentality, and a little bit of follow-up on Rhonda's question about how those boards are populated. I'm not sure if that was answered thoroughly enough or not, but just is there a call to the public for that? Is it we wait for people to express interest? How does that happen?
Well, first of all, I'm going to invite legal counsel up to talk about the instrumentality public school. It's a very good question, is a public school. Instrumentality charter is a public school. And so there are two boards. There's the governance board that runs the day-to-day operations of the school, but the accountability piece rests right here. And there's no question about that, because the state will not support a public school that is not being successful in serving students well. So that's a very high-level view. But I invite legal if there's anything addition to add to that.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. And then how is the governance board selected? I recognize the fact that with the charter proposal, there were some folks identified to anchor the application. I saw that in there when I read through the application. And obviously there's the vice president of the technical college, I believe, was identified.
Correct.
Along with another vice president or vice chancellor from the university as a strong partner. So, but I don't know what that conversation was as that proposal was being built. And obviously you said there are some additional leadership that has been talked about with that.
Correct.
So I can refer to the JDAL contract that we have, because that's the one that's in existence. So the contract with the school board will identify that there will be a governance council, and it will, as an very high level, identify the number of people on that governance council. Then once that's been identified, there will then be bylaws, and Brenda, you can correct me too if I'm wrong, because I know you were involved too in the JDAL. Then there will be bylaws that will establish the makeup of that board. So whether you want to identify a number of parents, number of community members, various different cross sections of representation that you would like to have on that governance council. And then we'll talk about how long your term is, how you get appointed. And that, again, that is part of the charter. That is what we are delegating to the charter to come to an agreement with, and that is the autonomy that a charter school has, is that governance council, and they get to decide what that makeup of their governance council is as part of the contract then with the school board. There's high-level provisions in the contract, but it's really the charter itself to decide who makes up that governance council, and their reporting to that governance council.
So they inevitably could choose not to have parents, and it would just have to be like that? It would just have to be.
A charter has that autonomy, and just and they can decide how that is made up. Now when the charter was written, there again we had to identify the community partners, and those individuals will be guiding through that process of what those bylaws will look like. Mm-hmm. Someone has to establish bylaws, so that they will be in that process, and they will be deciding what those bylaws should look like and who should be members of their council.
And I'm not saying that there's a problem with the cross section that we have now. I know we do get we have parents. I think there's some student representation on it. I think, or
Well, we do have a student council.
Okay. Well,
but they're not part of the governance council.
But there's a cross. I mean, maybe that's something to look at if we're renegotiating the charter, anyways. But I guess more.
That would be for the bylaws, though. That's not
okay.
for.
So, all right. So if we set up so the board's going to approve the charter amendments, right? So let's set JDL aside. That's going to be just amendments, but we're setting up a new charter school, and we agree when we establish it to a certain initial board. Are we agreeing on, because we would have to be, right? I mean,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'd have to go get the contract. Okay. I believe the contract with JDAL is very high level of how many. Jen,
I can read portions.
Do you have
of
it?
If you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you.
JDAL will be directed by an independent council that will consist of not less than 7 nor more than 11 members, each serving a 3-year term. The council will include parents or guardians of JDAL students. Green Bay Area Public School District retired educators, and community members. JDAL employees shall not be members of the council. A majority of members will be individuals who are not employees or officers of Green Bay Area Public School District. The council will establish bylaws. The council shall oversee the operational, financial, educational, and collaborative aspects of the charter school.
Okay, so in the case of JDL, and I would assume in anything else we create, then JDL could not that you would anyway, again, not that you would anyways, but you could not choose to have no parents because your charter requires them to be represented.
The charter they wrote requires.
That's in the contract between the school board and
Right.
the council, correct?
Right.
The school board approves the charter.
Right.
Correct. Correct.
So presumably it was important to us then to make sure that parents were included in the contract that was drafted up. The thing that could happen, that again, I'm not worried that it would happen at Dewey, but sounds like you could in there go with one parent and 6 community members that aren't parents, not that you probably would, but you could, but you couldn't go to no parents because that's in the contract.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm not hearing this, and maybe this is just a question there's some other laws out there that cover this, but I'm not hearing anything about a representation of minority demographics in that.
Correct. There's nothing in there.
The
in this current
contract,
charter.
the contract addresses recruitment of minority students and
No, I'm
serving a
talking about
diverse
the board
population.
itself, though,
but
the governance.
not in that contract language.
But possibly for a
They
future
certainly
charter
wouldn't
school?
be denied.
Pardon?
They wouldn't be denied. I would hope that we would do a cross-section, to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think wouldn't be a bad idea to
Yes,
include
ma'am.
that in some bylaws.
Yes,
I would just caution you that if you're gonna you don't wanna set requirements so strict that you can't function as a council, because if it requires X percentage to be underrepresented populations and you're unable to find, because sometimes it's hard to find people to serve on these councils, and then you're unable to find those representatives, you may be stuck in a position where you have vacant seats because you're unable to find people of those cross-sections to serve on your council. And in some cases, there was a time when John Dewey did have, I don't want to say difficulty, but had to do some work to get people to serve on the council.
Could we try really hard?
Yes, Pam.
Perhaps what the way to word is that the council member would have cross-representation of the makeup of the district.
Reflects student enrollment.
So we're not voting on this. You just need our opinion as to whether we want to go ahead with editing amending the charter for Dewey.
Correct.
And we're just doing this we don't have to vote, an official vote on this.
I don't believe so.
We would vote on the amendments when they would come
Correct.
forward
When they
for
would
next
come
time?
forward.
Yes.
Do we
Katie?
need to know the fiscal impact?
The slots are there.
Yeah, there's no, yeah.
So there's,
We don't see
right.
one. This-
So then when, so this could start for 1920?
Our plan actually was to expand in the online programming this first semester of this upcoming school year, which would provide us some time to work with teaching and learning to unpack the middle school standards and seek some professional development so that we can have age-appropriate curriculum and learning opportunities ready for our 6th and 7th graders for the second semester.
Of this year? Only in the online part or live by the semester?
First semester for online, second semester for all other pathways, such as project-based learning.
Laura?
You don't anticipate having to hire more staff at this time?
At this time, no.
Okay, but How about next year, if it expands, I mean?
If we continue to grow, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So does this mean you're going to amend the charter and bring it, do we have to vote on?
Yeah, we have to vote on the amended charter.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, bring it on.
Anybody else, it sounds like people are agreeing
Comfortable?
with and comfortable with
Yes.
this. Anybody want to speak out?
Thank you.
All right.
All right,
Thank you, thank you, work on that. Thank you, Mr. Becker, too. All right. That is the big chunk of mine. There's a lot more to go, so I'm going to turn it over to you,
Okay.
Brenda.
First item is our board policy discussion, and I'm looking at this as a, not an in-depth discussion, but more guidance to the committee that's going to be meeting, which is Laura, Andrew, and I, which will be meeting looking at all of the 100 policies, and then I know Melissa sent us a cross-comparison of what we have and what maybe we are missing or we might want to consider adding. So at this point, I was just interested in having people have an opportunity to weigh in for, I really think we need a policy on this, or, I want you to, have some specific item in a policy that we already have that you think is missing. And if you think of something or doesn't mean you can't give it to us later, but we just thought we'd have this opportunity now to give that kind of input. Ed?
Yeah, a couple, and I'm looking at the current policies. I didn't look at that cross-section. I had difficulty negotiating that one, but I was looking at within the 100s, of course, 110 and 150, and then they're both referenced elsewhere there I want to mention. So looking at 110, it does reference annual goals and objectives, that we have a duty to establish annual goals and objectives. If we have we done a good enough job as far as disseminating that, clarifying that, getting that out there? I'm not sure we have. The annual goals and objectives to be aligned to the strategic plans. I think that needs to be addressed again. How we're making that happen, if we're making that happen, if we're not, do we need to keep that in there? The other one that I would ask you to take a look at is with 150, and just a concern about, frankly, it's the word team and how it's used in that. I think there is a differentiation between board and administration, and I think that there's concern, it's been expressed by, not just by myself, but others, as far as whether or not the board and administration are truly a team, or if there's a separation, if that needs to be addressed. Now, both of those are referenced in another set of policies, personnel policies, and I'm going to bring that up. 533, I believe, was changed back in 2010, and I've got some concerns with the language there, and it has to do with hiring people. And if you look at 533, it's staff recruitment and hiring. It says the school board shall approve the employment, so on and so forth, upon the recommendation of the superintendent. And shall to me means must, and I'd like that to be looked at. The way it reads, it says that basically if the superintendent recommends something, that we are obligated then to approve the hiring, which truly isn't, it can't be the intent, although it may have been the intent of the previous superintendent to make that happen that way. That was before you, Michelle, but I have concerns with that language, so.
Well, and the board, that is the board's responsibility.
I know it's the board's responsibility, but.
I didn't realize it was there,
Yeah.
so.
Ed, can you read, when you mentioned there's a policy with the word team, can you read that policy?
I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to
someone-
pull it up. It's
It
150.
refers to the board, I can get it in a second here. It refers to the board superintendent team, is what it, hang on, what it specifically references.
Yeah, I think
I think it's in that, like 2 or 3 times the word team in there, but.
Yeah, okay, so it's the second paragraph under current policy 150, board powers and I did that. I turned it off on purpose in between in case that was getting the feedback from me. All right. So policy 150, board powers and duties, as currently written. Second paragraph, the board shall work with the superintendent of schools as a team in providing educational leadership for the district. The board/superintendent team shall strive to meet the following leadership standards, and then a list is detailed, bulleted list is provided. So that's what's being referred to here.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we need to set up an adversarial situation here, but there's a differentiation, I believe, between governance and administration, and I think that clouds it. I would like that group also to look at school board duties from the statutes, particularly 12012 sub 2. It does refer to general supervision, and again, I'm not getting into the idea that we need to be supervising, but the language is fairly specific as far as board duties, board authority and duties in statutes regarding looking at things that I think in some ways we've been discouraged to do in the past.
Which one is that? 141?
12012 sub 2, general supervision, that Wisconsin statutes.
Oh, the statute, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As we look at revising general board duties under 150, I think we need to, it is cross-referenced, but I think that perhaps that language needs to be looked at, the statutory language needs to be included in the policies.
Okay, Andrew?
So I just wanted to point out, and I certainly, given the importance of the policies, I understand if you want to go another direction, but this was originally to be July 20th and 23rd, and I'm one of the committee members, and I can't do it then. I think I'm hoping to find dates within the next 4 weeks that my family situation will allow me to do that, and I just wanted to make sure, rather than just stick the board with that, are we okay with that, or is there any reason we need them sooner, or any legal reason we would need them sooner? And I would, if that was the case, I'd step aside, but otherwise I'd like to do it if a timeline a few weeks later is still acceptable to the board.
I don't see why not.
And if we can't find it, and if it goes beyond a month, then I would just step aside for someone else, but I'm pretty confident it'll work out within that time.
Okay, we'll give you that opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's, yeah.
All right, thank you.
And just keep us posted.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is there any other?
Can you just reiterate for the public why we're revising or looking at this?
Because we haven't looked at them for a long time, and we generally tend to review policy.
Okay, so it's just like revisiting?
Yeah.
Okay.
But our 110 policy has our old district mission and beliefs in it, not our current ones. So it was, so that's basically,
When was the last time?
I don't remember.
It would vary based on the policy. I think 110 maybe was 2002.
It says April
you know.
22nd, 2002 on
Yeah.
the bottom of the 110 policy,
Yeah,
no,
so.
the 150 board policies.
What was the year?
2002.
Yeah, 2002, so it's been a long time.
I would just caution you on that, though. It says when it was revised, that doesn't mean that it wasn't reviewed. And so what I'm suggesting going forward is that we add on the policies, the dates that things are reviewed, so that even if we don't make changes, the public understands that they haven't been sitting on a shelf
yes.
since 2002,
Right.
and that they could have been reviewed. I don't know, I haven't reviewed them since I've been here, but they could have been reviewed since 2002.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the technical difficulties here.
Posting a board meeting
Post-
minutes.
Okay, so this was, Andrew asked to have this on the agenda, so I guess I'll have you introduce your suggestion, and then we can have conversation about it.
Sure. So I asked for this in response to multiple requests from members of the public. Maybe I get more of them than others in my board clerk role, which would make sense. But regarding why do we have to wait all the way until the minutes are formally approved, which can be sometimes, depending exactly when it hits, it could be more than till the next board meeting if we had a special meeting just a couple days before. I don't know of any situation where we failed to improve the minutes, and I can think of maybe 3 or 4 in 18 years when someone just verbally had oh, hey, whoops, I was there, you forgot to put me in the attendance, and it was just corrected by unanimous consent. I'm not suggesting that minutes, so my suggestion would be that minutes, when available, could they go online in the normal place and be marked pending board approval, and then be changed to final after the next board meeting? And my intent in this is not to guarantee instant availability of formal minutes, because that's not realistic. I'm just looking at whenever, I would think, and you can help out with this, Sandy, I'm thinking that probably things might be done not tomorrow, but within a couple weeks, and it could be a pending, or is there more to it than that, or are there reasons they're not usually done right up until the end? I'm not criticizing, I'm just asking.
Just based on the time I get to do them. I mean, other things will probably sit, but, I mean, that's fine.
Well, I'm not necessarily.
What's your average length of time when just how you function now in terms of fitting in writing minutes? What would you say is the average time between when the meeting happens and when you have the board minutes completed,
I don't do them until right before. I mean, I wait until.
Okay.
If I could, something is.
It's not mine.
So Sandy and I talked, and it really depends on the complexity of what occurred. If there's amendments, those kinds of things to different things, that's one thing. Is it important to put the votes? Is that, and then can you follow up with narrative after? We were just talking about, are there two different things you could do where you'd put the votes out there? Is that, I'm not sure what people are asking you for, and that's what we talked about.
I don't know that it's been in that much specificity, other than more along the lines of, you probably know what's in it before the formal approval, and I was wondering if we were holding back because there was any legal proscription against having provisional minutes.
So that you would post, but then if there's the board votes and there's change, is that?
You wouldn't mark it final till the board voted, which could theoretically include an amendment, but those are extraordinarily rare. Again, I'm not suggesting though that we would have, that we would be directing administration to have them within, 3 days or a week or anything like that.
You're basically just saying, once you finish writing them, can we just put them on Neptune regardless of whether we voted on them or not, right, Andrew?
In Neptune, it only says minutes, so they'll have to go in the minutes to see that they're not approved. Okay, so then after the meeting, I'll have to go in the minutes and take that sentence off of
the one sentence, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
They won't be able to see it in Neptune unless they actually go in and see that they're in.
But at least they would see minutes with the sentence that says these are not yet approved by the board, as opposed to seeing that there aren't any minutes. And like I said, I'd like to see us try this, but my intent again is not to set a specific time limit on these, but I know there's ones where the only public portion of the minutes is a motion to go into closed session, and then the vote on going to closed session, and that's it sometimes. So is that?
And I've only done it that way because it's always been that way. I mean.
Okay, yeah, and I knew,
Been
right.
that way, the governance of the
And
minutes.
I think it's just different. I mean, we just have more public interest in minutes now, and more, I mean, I haven't had people ask me before, and now they did, so I thought I'd put that out there. So I'd like to see if we could just give it a try without promising a specific number of days to minutes or something like that. Just for starters, just if it's available, just
Post it pre-vote.
post it pre-vote with the one sentence that will later get.
Do you create some sort of expectation now when they're going to come out? Right now, it's known that they will come out when they're approved after a board meeting. So now, let's say this week Sandy can get it out in 3 days, and next week it might be a week, back to 5 days, So then are people going to be complaining that, well, when do they come out? This week they came out 3 days. Next time a week, what is?
I'm
would that be a problem?
content to say that we got all these minutes out somewhat between a little bit before and a lot before we would have under the old system, and that's when they've been available. I suppose if I felt that constituents were just clamoring for certain minutes within a certain number of days, I guess that would be a discussion and talking about reprioritizing timelines, but I don't think that's likely.
Sandy, how long have you been doing this? How many years?
20?
I think our system works pretty well. That's how I feel about it. So that would be my position on that.
I'm wondering, so it's not just the votes, because the votes are easy to post. They would be the quickest. Correct me, when does the web stream, or when does this meeting?
Thursday. So I checked with Jeff before.
Okay.
So tonight's meeting will be available on Thursday.
Okay. And if someone were to call, I'm just trying to think from a time perspective, if someone were to call and ask you about the minutes and the board has not approved them, do you tell them? Okay, so you would tell them if someone had specific interest.
Tell them what?
Tell them what happened if they asked
If they have
about
a
it.
question about an action item. and
Or
a vote
anything,
and
either
things,
you
or
would say
anything.
pending board approval, you would say that, so you would answer that.
Well, actually, I would, that you can just answer because it
Oh,
happened.
the vote has happened.
Correct.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we can see what that means, in terms of what that looks like. I do have concerns if there's a timeline, and to Dr. Wagner's point, what will be the expectation of the community? And then we need to, just to have them out there. I don't know what's helpful, because I'm not sure what people are asking for, I guess.
Are those meetings up on the Thursday captioned already?
Yes.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if that was a barrier, so.
It might be later in the day on Thursday, depending on the length of the meetings.
So I wasn't sure if that was, if we were hamstrung at all by the fact of having to go, I didn't realize the captioning was that fast, and so I didn't know if it would be a quote unquote, unofficial video that we couldn't even make reference to. So that being said, I don't necessarily like the idea of having if minutes are done, I would like the idea of not yet board approved changing to board approved. I don't think I like the idea of doing like skeleton minutes with the votes and then filling it out. I think that would create more confusion than it would solve. But what if we just looked at it in the case of the non-videotape meetings, that we could do the provisional minutes, because those are your short, and those usually are your pretty straight.
Special meetings.
And that way, special meetings, that way, if someone really wishes to see that, yep, we had a closed session, and here's who showed up for it, and they voted to go into closed session, that could be available pretty quickly, and then if there's a much more complex thing like a board meeting, it's available online in an accessible caption format. I would think that would cover the bases. I'd be okay with that.
So just pre-post the minutes if it's a meeting that wasn't taped, recorded.
A special board meeting.
Special board meeting that wasn't recorded.
That wasn't taped.
Yeah.
If there's additional information, then if we try this, and then if there's additional information that would, we need to reconsider.
Oh yeah, if we try and it doesn't work, then I'd want to hear about it, because my goal here isn't to create burden for people. It's just making sure that people aren't held up from seeing something that might be already have been done quickly just because of a formality or because of we've always done this. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on that? All right, and next we have our board vacancy. As you all know, Dr. Wagner submitted his letter of resignation effective the end of the month, a specific date, 31st?
End of this month,
Okay,
yes.
all right. And I know I'll miss him and miss you, Dr. Wagner, and but at this point, we have to determine how we're going to fill that vacancy. The last time we filled this vacancy, we provided notice of the vacancy. That went on our website, the newspaper, social media, robocall, email, community organizations, diversity coordinator, family engagement coordinators. Then we set a timeline from the point at which it was posted until, in this case, it was, I think it was like 2.5, 3 weeks. We set that time. And then we set a date for screening the applications, and we set a date for doing the interviews and the selection. And as you recall, all of those meetings were open meetings, and they were posted as open meetings. So I guess at this point, that's how we did it last time. It seemed to work in terms of the logistics of getting that done. So I don't know if anybody else has different ideas of what you want to do. Otherwise, if we want to do the same procedure, then we could just set the specific dates moving forward as to when we want to have our screening and our interview dates. Rhonda?
So you said there were open meetings. I'm not sure what you're talking about, because can you just explain that? Was it?
They were posted meetings like this is,
right?
And anybody who wanted to come could come to the meeting, just like these meetings.
And were you discussing people that had applied?
Yeah, the first meeting we had received all of the applications before the meeting, so we had all read all of the applications, and we determined how many people we wanted to interview and determined which people we wanted to interview out of that application pool.
And this was discussed in open session?
Yes.
All of the interviews were held in open
Yeah.
session. Those are posted open
Those
session.
are posted open session meetings.
Our discussion after the interviews was open session.
But the names released?
Yes. Of the 7 people we were interviewing, yes.
Okay. But not the other candidates that weren't considered, the ones that submitted that weren't in the finals?
I don't think we provided a list. No one requested the list.
No, somebody did request, because remember we had to redact.
You're right, the press gazette requested the names of the 7 finalists.
But did they
Actually,
request
all
the
of
whole pile? Yeah, the whole pile of candidates.
Cindy,
that
what
we
did you
had.
have to redact?
Addresses.
Oh, I see.
Phone numbers.
They request the whole letters? Or?
I think they did.
I can't recall, but I think they did. You're right, there was a public records request.
Yes.
And we released it minus their home addresses or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And contact information.
And phone numbers and all that, yeah.
Yeah. Do we look at dates now? Did I do that?
Sure. Tentatively, Lori's on vacation this week, so we were looking at potentially posting by July 26th. I'm actually unavailable from August 23rd until September 4th. And so, if we post on the 26th and we give it, I don't know what the 2 weeks would be,
The
9th of August, something like that. Yeah, 9th of August, 10th of, we could potentially post it on the 26th and have it close, the window close on the 10th. I think we closed it last time on a Friday. Friday at noon we closed it, and then the applications were ready for us to pick up that afternoon, I think. And then if we scheduled a meeting to screen the applicants the week of August 13th.
Can we do it the 13th? That's on Monday.
We
Is
don't
that-
have our regular board
Oh,
meeting.
geez,
Yeah.
and I'm,
Brenda, I think you're gone.
I'm gone. Yep, I forgot about that one.
14?
Are you
When
gonna
will you be
leave?
back?
I am back Tuesday evening. I could do it, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that week. I'm available.
You know, can I just throw this out there? I don't know how I feel about waiting 10 days to post something because one person is on vacation. I mean, we should have people who can pinch hit and do a posting is pretty straightforward kind of thing, I would hope. I mean,
Is it?
Yeah, I can connect with Lori and do it. Yeah. I was on maternity leave last time,
Oh, so you.
but I'll just connect with her with details.
and I'm also not talking about someone coming in to work on their vacation. I'm just talking about if there's others in the department that can do this. If she can do it, then maybe we can look at a bit sooner.
Well, how much different does it look like is it gonna look that much different than it did last year?
Probably not.
Right, so.
Probably.
Change the
So,
dates
so
and-
if that's the case, then it could be, so then how soon could we maybe post it?
Can we look tomorrow and see what we have, and then you're coming Wednesday?
Yeah.
Even that, and we can make sure that it's good to go, and then have that plan, if we could get it, the goal would be to try to get it out there on Wednesday? Is that-
Or even just by the end
Or
of
by
the
the end
week.
of the week, if we could? I don't know what
Today
Kristen's
is-
schedule is, but.
16, so we have it out by the 20th, which is
Friday.
Yeah. I would think that would,
Does that sound
probably
doable?
doable? Yeah.
But then where does that put us being able to?
To the 3rd.
August 3rd?
August 3rd, we pick them up,
Okay.
then August 6th, your meeting.
Can we, is it possible to tag that onto our meeting or the first pass at the
We have a
resumes?
special meeting at 5:15, and then we have.
On the
work session.
6th?
On the 6th?
Yeah, don't we? Was it?
I don't have,
I don't have that.
We have a special board meeting at 5:15.
On the 6th,
We
okay.
get that notification.
But we can move it
I don't have
4
a
o'clock if you
notification.
want.
Oh, yeah,
6th.
we could do it at 4.
So this isn't where we're doing the interviews, so everyone would have,
Screened and.
we would have had them, read them, and be narrowing down the process. We could do that on the
On the 6th.
on the 6th, and then
At 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
Does that work?
Yeah.
and then could we interview and vote them that week before people start becoming unavailable?
Cindy, do you have to then
Yeah, the problem
notify?
is
notify
notifying
everybody.
and setting up the interviews takes a little while.
We could say that, right, we could let people know up front that chosen applicants will be interviewed on such and such a date.
So they know and to be prepared.
And if there was an emergency
Yeah.
or something, I suppose we could.
We could include that.
So then
Sorry,
what is
My
that?
summer's terrible.
You know,
We have a meeting on
the 7th
the
already.
7th already.
Well, that's too soon, because they would be,
Can we just do it, then can we interview then on the 14th of August?
yeah, but it seems like we haven't gained back any of the time we just saved by posting a week earlier.
Yeah, no, that was gonna be our screen date, was the
screenings,
14th.
Yeah, so now we're actually.
So now we're actually
We're gonna
interviewing
choose
them.
on the 14th?
You choose
Yeah.
on the 14th. I'm available 14, 15, 16 that week.
Okay, all right. So what time would that be then?
So we're doing it the 14th?
On, at what time?
You said you got back the evening of the 14th, is that?
Yeah, I think I fly in at 1 to
Oh.
Milwaukee, so
Okay.
I should be
Brenda, can
there.
we do the 15th? That's that admin retreat that evening.
The 14th is?
I can't do the
The-
15th.
But an admin,
Oh, that I'm not here for?
but an admin with the board? So an admin retreat, this happens to be one of the not very many functions that only the members of the board really do anyways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have to have somebody here to help us shepherd candidates, and we
I
did
can
last
do it.
time.
Well,
That's fine.
we can.
I'll just skip that.
Well, that's not my intent. We should be able to,
We can show
should be able to show someone into the room.
But
No,
we
but
have
you have
taping
somebody
and
coming,
votes
you have someone coming while we're
And
interviewing.
maybe some administrators who want to come.
And,
Oh, you're talking about the room.
She's got another.
No. Somebody has to be, I'm
To
assuming
greet
we're
the
taping
candidates.
it. We're taping it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to take a vote that night, so I should be here to do the roll call and all of that, right?
Is that, do we wanna, is this one of those times where maybe we do want the meeting to be public, but not necessarily be, I mean, it's interviews.
It's someone that's going to be representing
All right.
the board, though.
Just making sure. I'm good with it. You're right, if it's.
So what difference does that make, that couldn't Andrew as the clerk take the vote?
I can be here. I'll just skip that event. That's okay.
is there a reason we can't do it on the 15th? Yeah, somebody's gotta be here to shepherd candidates in and out.
I can do it on the 15th.
I'm not available on the 15th.
Oh, okay.
I'll just do it the 14th.
So the 14th.
What time?
Well, we determined how many people we were going to interview last time because based on the number of letters we had too. I mean, if there's only 3 people,
Yeah, and we actually,
I think we have to determine that when we screen the applications on the 6th.
So what time do we want to start?
yeah, we should determine the
What
start
time are we gonna start? What time the meeting?
We're in a coma, 6.
What?
If we're all in a coma, 6, not too late.
So we
That's
go.
the last time we
I was even
started.
thinking 5.
Yeah.
And if, in
So we
the
interview.
event that everyone we contact can't go at 5, then maybe we change the time,
Yeah,
but,
I mean, for their sake, for convenience sake, they might not be able to get here before 5 o'clock.
but I bet one of the,
probably one of them will be
one
able
of
to.
Yeah.
them.
Okay.
I don't know, I think you may, I don't know how much, seemed to me that anything shorter than allowing up to a half hour would be cutting it awfully tight, but also I don't know that going beyond more than.
We did 30 minutes.
We did
last
30
time.
We had
minutes
30
last
minutes,
time.
we had seven interviewees, I think.
Yeah.
We did.
I don't know that you would necessarily, I could probably be happy with interviewing 5 or 6, although it probably
That depends.
depends.
I don't recall having any problem choosing last time as to who we were gonna interview. It was pretty seamless, I think. That's how I remember it.
It does, we wanna have a reasonable, I mean, yeah, we wanna have a meeting where we don't choose so many people that we're completely exhausted because presumably, we voted right away, didn't we?
Yep.
After the
We
last
did.
one?
We discussed and voted.
All right, so August 14th at 5 for interviews. I already forgot the other one. We're doing that Monday at 4 on the 6th to screen.
Right.
And then plan on having the postings all put out by Friday. And that'll give people 2 weeks.
2 business weeks to.
2 business weeks to get applications in. So then, last time we had, I'm trying to think when we, that's not on here. We had some guidance as to, I mean, I think we essentially asked candidates to just tell us why they want to be on the board. That was the prompt that we used. So we'll just do that again. And then we can decide we can decide then the night we screen, we can decide how we want to conduct the interviews, if we want to use the same questions, if we want to add or delete questions from last time. So we'll talk about that at the on August 6th. Does that work? All right. And then,
So you do want both of those meetings taped, the August 6th and the August 14th?
I don't know that we need to do the first one, the screening.
I think we should make sure we do the entire process as transparent as we can.
So we're gonna pay $600 to.
I think it would be a
record
mistake
half
to
an
not
hour.
do that. That's just my opinion, my
Okay.
own.
And a mistake because why? I mean, what's your concern? If we don't record the applicant screening?
I think we should make sure that through the entire process, we're transparent, and I think those, the taping of the meetings is part of that.
What do other people think?
I don't see harm in it. So I just want to just double check with Melissa. If I read correctly when I was studying, if there was something about an applicant where there was something very specific about something damaging and personal, the board could go into, in that rare case, go into a closed session for that. And I'm speaking about if, someone needed to bring up that there was, something severely reputationally damaging but relevant to the process in that unlikely situation.
You could only, can you hear me?
No.
No, I think you turned us all off. The back.
Can you hear me now?
No. Try again.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
The board can only convene into closed session for the reasons as noted in state statute, and it would be highly unlikely in screening a board applicant that you would meet that definition to go into closed session. It would have to be for reputational interests, and simply debating their qualifications for the board would not qualify as reputational interest.
Oh, right, I didn't mean that. I was talking about if there was something worse in a criminal background or something like that.
Well, criminal background is going to be public because that will be,
yep. So, okay. I'm just making sure we weren't missing any bases, but I guess I would err on, I guess I would err on the side of taping something if it's, the things that I see us not taping is like hiring of teachers, of hourly personnel, when we have to get through a lot of those quickly. This is a pretty big deal, so I would lean towards yes on it. $600. Hopefully, we're not having too many. Hopefully, this isn't an everyday thing. Hopefully, it's. It's twice in less than a year, but it's my third one of these in 18. So.
You turned your microphone
Yeah, I did turn it off because I thought it was. There you go. I was saying it's, yeah, I did it on purpose, and I thought I'd just yell, because I thought I was getting the feedback. Okay. You good back there? Yes? No? Okay. So just make sure, since my mic's on and working, it would be worth it to me to spend the $600 to tape it, because although we happen to have had 2 of these in the last year, this will also be my 3rd one in 18 years, so hopefully it's not too common of a thing, and I would err on the side of taping something if the public would find it interesting or important.
I don't think it's a matter of I don't think it's an error at all. I think, you know, it's the path we've kind of set as far as having our meetings recorded and aired, so it's a meeting, so I support the idea of doing that again, so.
All right, next we have the district alternative education. Anyway, I'll entertain a motion under the alternative education administrator job description.
I'll move to approve the district alternative education administrator and hearing officer job description as presented.
This one isn't a motion.
This isn't a motion.
Oh,
Oh, it's just,
Sorry.
it's discussion only? Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion.
oh yeah, that's right. We
Because we'll
decided
bring
to bring it back, so
We'll
I
bring it
forgot.
back
Yep.
so, to get it out there so the
All right.
public can understand it.
Right.
And it's part of the work through pupil services and some change to address need. So, Vicki?
Right, I'm asking the board to allow me to make a change in the pupil services department. It would not result in an addition of a staff member, nor will it result in an increase in costs to the district. I'm proposing a position titled Alternative Education Administrator and Hearing Officer. This position would support and train, this position would allow for the pupil services staff to get back into the business of prevention rather than holding the hearings and all of the work that goes into prepping for them and the follow-up afterwards. We did have, as I shared last week, 163 hearings. Typically, with the preparation and actually holding the hearings, we're talking a little bit over 2 hours per. This person would oversee also the management of the online learning for students that have been removed from their schools for disciplinary reasons. We didn't have that this past year. It was really piecemealed throughout the year. They would also work with building leaders to appropriately follow the multi-level systems of support framework and really focus on how do we keep these at-risk youth actually in the buildings rather than having to move towards disciplinary hearings and removal. Lastly, the position would provide administrative leadership and guidance and support for all of our alternative programs throughout the district. We have many, some most embedded within the schools, for example, Pathways, GED, Forward Bound. This person would oversee and help manage and make sure that we are meeting benchmarks that we've set, providing the support that the staff may need, evaluating the program with the assistance of Dr. Stramp, taking a look at if the programs are really doing what we need them to do.
Any questions or feedback? We have a job description before us. Did you, Chris? Go ahead.
There's certainly a need to take a load off back of some other people.
You said that, what's the financial impact? I mean, you mentioned it, something about that.
The federal government has increased our funding for Title IV-A, Safe and Healthy Students, and this position, as well as the director position / equity coordinator, can partially be funded through the Title IV-A.
Okay. I understand the position. I do have concerns about additional layers and adding additional positions. So is there anything in terms of, is this replacing anything?
Yes,
is
sir.
this a totally new position? I mean, what
Both.
does this do in terms of the table of organization?
Good question. I will be eliminating an associate director position so that we can do this.
Okay.
So
Yes,
to
ma'am.
clarify, it's almost kind of a wash, but not even because you get the money from the federal government.
Correct. The district will still pay a portion of it, but 15 to 20% would be covered through the title. Thank you for the consideration.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our intercity student council report. Are you giving that tonight, Noah? Yeah, Jamie did email me and said she was, had an illness and wasn't able to make it, so if you can't, if you want, fine, if you're not
You're not gonna
ready.
get- Not too much, but, so the general idea with the ICSC, although it's my belief that we should meet in the summer as our Constitution basically tells us to, previous practice was to not, and I'm not so sure that the Constitution was actually really thoroughly read by anybody who ran it previously, so I think it was just ignored. So for now, since we haven't met, there isn't too much to discuss. Our previous advisor, Patty Butcher, resigned, and from that position, I believe she is still a teacher. So we have to look for a new advisor now, which we haven't had to do in a while. So, yeah, we're trying to, I'm talking with mostly the president, and I have an email drafted to all the ICSC officers so that we can, just to help us outline how we pick a new advisor, although that is detailed in our Constitution. So we'll be doing that, and official business will commence in September. But for now, it's more informal discussion with the council members about potential candidates for advisor.
So do the advisors apply and you guys screen, and how does that work?
So the board has to post it.
Yeah,
but
it's posted.
It's posted.
It is posted.
Okay.
And Mr. Flood has gone out, and Mr. Flood, who is head of athletics and activities, has, because we didn't get a good response, in fact, no one applied, actually went then to the activities directors in each of the schools and reached out to them, or to the leaders who are student council leaders in the schools right now, to talk to them about if their interest or perhaps helping to get the word out as well. And I don't know, Mr. Magus, is there any other update on that?
Just that Mr. Flood was looking into it as of the end of last week.
Right.
But it isn't, he will be in charge of handling any ICSC requests or needs during the summer until the position is filled.
Yeah, so he's working on it.
Okay.
So how does, if there were council members who had a suggestion, the staff wouldn't be probably obligated to check their email or anything over the summer, but could people be found if someone went to probably Mr. Flood and say, we
Yes.
suggest this person? He
Yes.
would at least, we would assume that in most cases, we'd be able to get a hold of someone for a phone call and a thanks or no thanks.
And I think
Yes.
we would definitely give audience and entertain any suggestions that were there from people who are qualified and interested, and especially people who the students felt would be good representation of their
So someone with a suggestion could take that to Mr. Flood?
Yep.
But most of the council doesn't know that she resigned. She only told the previous two presidents, leaving everyone else in the dark completely. So should I inform the council of that if they do have suggestions, just so that they have that opportunity?
Yes, I think we can coordinate that. I can talk to Mr. Flood and have him work to send a message in conjunction with you as soon as tomorrow. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right. I don't know if anybody has school visits in the summertime.
I don't have a school visit, but I just want to mention, I'm part of a committee that's joined, we're partnering with the city of Green Bay to develop a Green Bay Safe Walk and Bike Plan, and we're looking for input on where you bike,
where you walk, why you think certain parts of the city are safer than others. They're looking for input, and in order to do this the best way that we can. And there's links posted for interactive maps and the ability to participate in the feedback that they're looking to get. And I have to take my glasses off because I can't see. Safe Walk Bike Home is, I guess if you Google that, you'd get the link about the project, and then GB Safe Walk Bike will give you your online interactive map as well as providing input. I'm planning to post this on my school board Facebook page as well. But I think if you're anybody that wants a safer, biking and walking experience in the city, especially if you're a parent or just someone that wants to have a better experience, I would highly encourage you to give some feedback and have your say on this.
There's also a link if you still have the press release on the Safe Schools. It's a press release, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there was a link to that because I went out and went in and filled it out. It's quick and easy to link it up that way. So.
Yeah, I'll actually post that on my Facebook page.
Yeah, because it was really easy to find then. Had a little trouble figuring
And
out how to
there
make it
were
work.
people at Open Streets. I was there this weekend, and they had a ton of people that came to give feedback. So that was great.
I've had a couple of school visits, but the thing that I really want to mention is that today, Ed and I and Michelle, we went to the groundbreaking at the Wildlife Sanctuary for the expansion of the 4K program there. There were quite a lot of people there, and they've already started clearing land and are going to start the progress. Michelle gave a very nice speech. It was really a nice event.
Good. I think it's exciting in that they'll have they're going to have the new construction done by 2019 here on the board, and I know Ed has done some really good work with them and Barbara around safety and security, which is really important as they do the new construction. But what they're also able to do is add sections already this year. And they have a wait list. I think I spoke with Mary McCabe, and they're already full in either, I don't know if it's I don't want to say it wrong. So one of the sections is full in the second classroom, but I know they have a few slots left but I don't know if it's AM or PM. So anyone is interested out there in learning more about the nature-based 4K program at the Wildlife Sanctuary, you can either call the district office or call Mary McCabe, because I know or Ann Barsh, they're still looking for individuals. But if they just want to call here, we'll get them to the right people.
Thank you. It's not a school visit per se, but I drive down Humboldt Road every day, and so I get to see Baird, the new Baird school going up. And I would suggest if you have the opportunity to drive by now, that it's really fun to see a whole new school going up. It's going to be such a boon for that neighborhood and for our district. So I thought I'd pass that on.
You may not know this, but there is I can't even think of what it's called. I'm just blanking out. Technology. They're taking pictures of it. Drone. They're putting a drone up there once a week and taking pictures of it. So Mike Stengel came and shared. He was quite proud of his photography.
So is that
Here I zoomed in, but I didn't want to scare it.
Is that posted on that we can look at it?
I'm assuming that Lori.
We post them on Baird's Facebook page.
Baird's
Also on
Facebook
Baird's
page.
website, and we share them on the district as well.
Oh, okay, all right.
That'll be fun.
For that.
So people can watch, but Mike was quite proud of his skills on the drone. It was pretty funny.
All right, I think the next is, I was gonna offer to take a break, but it looks like we can whip through most of this pretty quickly. So next is our teaching and learning report, and that'll be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
Thank you, Brenda. We have 2 action items. The first, I move that pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 120.12, paren 13, paren B, The list and description of the 2018-19 student academic standards in the areas of mathematics, science, reading and writing, geography, and history, as presented, and with said academic standards constituting the board-adopted standards that are required under Wisconsin statute section 118.30, paren 1G, paren A, be approved.
Second that.
We do this every year.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I move that the middle school mathematics resources, $131,038.79, as presented, be approved.
Second?
Are
Sandy.
you wanting to speak, Betty, or?
Next one.
Next one, okay. Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
That concludes our report.
Okay, under discussion, organizational support, discussion, public comment, and action items, I move that the CISA 7 contract for $269,870 as presented be approved.
Second.
Is this the one, Betty?
Yes.
Okay. Let's make sure before you leave, you fill out a form. You don't need to do it before, one of those blue speaking forms. Before you speak, though, we do need to make sure that, see if there's any board members that have questions or discussion item.
Just a comment. You may have noticed in the application, one of the pages from the CISA, a listing of all the districts within CISA 7. And if you haven't had a chance to, you may want to go back and look at it. It is very eye-opening to see the big difference between our district and the other districts. There are so many very small districts there, and one just wonders about the redundancy and how things are done. The district closest to us, I believe, is Howard Suamico, and we're about 3.5 times bigger than they are. So when people in the area make comparisons among the school district, or more often between our district and others, it's like night and day. They're just there's not a reasonable comparison there, in my opinion, whatsoever. Thank you. I just wanted to share that with you.
Can we make sure that we can let people know what we're voting on, what is happening with this money, what we'll be voting to receive?
Well, the contract is on Neptune, right? Yeah, so.
But in a nutshell.
It's, CISA provides us with services, and as Chris was alluding to, we don't sign up for the volume of services that they provide, because we have a lot of our own staff that are able to do the work. So, and I don't know, it's I don't know if somebody's here that knows more about the details, but the NWTC is a program that we have some of our students attending. There's educational programs that are on here. Our Neptune management system is on there for almost $1,800. We have some after-school programming. I'm looking for, video services is $10,000. And then the NWTC is we're paying for our students to be enrolled in that program.
And those
The
are
Learning for Independence program.
Right, those are our special needs students who are 18 to 21 years old, who have that extended school experience because they can by law and statute do that.
So their campus is on NWTC,
On
so
the
they
campus.
don't come to school in our building.
Otherwise, we would provide it here, but
Right.
it's worked out very well. But that's a big ticket on there, I can't see it.
Yeah, that's $103,000. It's $2,900 per student. It's 35 students.
Okay. I had someone ask, so I just thought it would be good to
And then
explain it.
there's
Yeah, you can just, if you go to.
some of.
On the record.
And then the after-school program
Yeah,
is
is
a large
another
piece.
big ticket item, so.
Yeah, over $200,000 of that 269 is direct services to students between the special ed and the after-school
Yeah,
program.
that's
So it's-
a good summary.
Yeah, very good. You've done what I did.
Idle looking.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right, any other questions, or otherwise then go ahead, Betty, you had some comments?
Betty Kosick, 2346 Browning Road. So you said just now that this contract is located someplace that we can see it?
It's on Neptune.
Okay. Well, my question...
It's one of the it's the attached, you know how to do attachments on Neptune? Have you done that before?
Yes, I was
Yeah, so
actually
it-
on there today looking
So
at
it's
the
one of the
handouts.
attachments.
Okay.
That's how I just pulled it.
Well, I wasn't concerned about it until I came tonight, but I was, and I didn't know that 200,000 was directly to student services, but my concern is the system here. And I was wondering if we had any other choices for services here, for taping or for the audio? And if not, have we investigated any other providers that we could have in this room? And does this have to be acted upon, does this contract have to be acted upon, approved tonight, or is there time to look for someone else?
If I
Go
could.
ahead.
So
we
it's
have a-
basically 3 questions.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I know that Lori Blakesley, who's not here, has looked and had conversations with Camera Corner as well, because the recommendation or the discussion early from the board was perhaps we should be doing something more permanent, and that would have an impact, you know, in terms of cameras in permanent spots. So she is not here to address that, but to your point, and I know you and I have talked about this as well, it is being looked into. It would not be something that would move quickly because we'd have to have board approval for the purchase and whatnot, but it is something that Lori is working on to bring back to the board for further discussion.
Would we be able to make an amendment to pull that off and just vote on the rest?
Well, we wouldn't have services then. I mean, we.
Services start
The
July 1st.
services started last week.
So it's a time-sensitive.
Right.
Right, so I think I think Lori's been looking at options and things like that, but it's still a work in progress. But at this point, we need to be able to record, and CISA has been providing that service for us for a long time.
Right.
And I think from what I understand, and I haven't been involved in all the details, but, for a reasonable price for what they provide to us.
So basically what I'm hearing is that we can go with this right now and investigate for this room possibilities for later for improvement.
Yes.
Because we have a lot of feedback back there for.
Yeah, we've not had this
probably
much trouble in a very
50% of
long
the
time.
meeting, so.
Yeah.
That's why I decided to come up here
What?
and ask.
The equipment that's outdated.
Is this, just to clarify.
You mean we
is
have new
this-
mics and outdated
Do we own this, or does
soundboards?
CISA own this?
The mics we own,
Okay.
and some of the things CISA owns, correct, Jen? Correct.
PA system is owned by the district.
Right.
The microphones belong to CISA.
All the microphones do?
Yes?
These
Although
are
these really are not,
These aren't the problem.
these really aren't too bad. They don't look fancy, but they're actually pretty decent.
So
Is
it sounds
our-
like- it sounds like-
Is it our mixing board?
I'm sorry.
Is it our mixer or yours?
Your mixer is an antique.
Is
And
that
it's
what you're
struggling
using?
tonight, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you are using our mixer, which is ancient.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
So,
a problem.
so we know we have to do something.
I'm so glad I came up here, because now I can see that we need to buy a new, whatever that thing is.
It's a mixer. It's a mixer.
Thank you, and I will fill out a
So
blue
I think the
sheet. Thank you
taping
so much.
service we
Thanks,
get
Betty.
is pretty
Did we
good.
answer both your questions? You had two.
You answered all of them, yes.
Oh, all right.
Yes, you
I
did.
don't remember what the other one was. Okay,
Okay. Thanks, Betty.
thanks.
You'd have to go out for RFP as well.
Right, so that would take long too, so.
I remember having the discussion, and it wasn't it going to be quite a lot of money if, like, Camera Corner did it? A big investment up front.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an investment, but.
Yeah.
If we have pieces within our own system that are obsolete, that's,
That's part
That's
of
on
what
us.
you
Yeah,
have
it's
to.
part
or is what we have here obsolete, but we have other meeting space? I would certainly look at individually, I would look at other rooms if they had enough if they were wired well enough for sound before I'd go buying a whole lot of new stuff, but that, I'm not suggesting we debate that and figure that out here and now.
Okay.
So we'll bring it forward in August, because Lori's looking into it, and let you know where we're at.
Yeah, although it's probably not time sensitive since we now have a
That's true.
year
but-
contract. So I mean, you know, if she's got other things,
Yeah,
it's not
okay.
an urgent thing to put on next month's agenda necessarily.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any other questions? Otherwise, Sandy, go ahead.
Becker?
Aye?
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye. Carried 7-0.
I move that the job description for monitors as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye?
McCoy?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
Yeah, I move that the job description for the site director of after-school programming as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Wagner?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
I move that the transfer of Margaret Babe, Associate Director of Pupil Services at the District Office Building, 12 months, at a salary of $104,951, Group 9, 98th percentile, 1718 step rate, to Business Education Teacher at East High School, 191 days, at a salary of $66,613, M1 Step 16, 2018-19 step rate, effective July 1st, 2018, as presented, be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
No.
Wagner?
Aye.
Carried 6-1.
I move that the consent items as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. And,
Yeah.
were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was gonna say, there's no,
There's
no
no-
motion to be made for closed session because there's no closed session item,
Right.
so.
So, and then, I know Chris didn't want a big send-off, but I do want to say I very much appreciated being on the board with you and appreciate your deep, your deep understanding of the issues that schools face with your experience that you've had, just calm way you have of getting to the essence of some of the problems that we've looked at. So we'll miss having you on the board, but I wish you well, and I know Michelle wanted to say something too. Thanks.
You know, as you think about 33 years in public education and the commitment, and I know it wasn't all on the board, and I wasn't here when you were the principal at Preble High School, one of the largest high schools in the state, along with also working in central office with special needs students. I know that has been, along with your board work, and I want to talk a little bit about that in terms of how you help staff. It's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job, any administrator would tell you, because of the service that you provide to children. So as we think about, and I know people are saying that you will be missed, and you will, I think we all recognize and respect how important family is and how many years of sacrifice you probably made being away from family to do those duties, to serve other people's children and families. And so thank you for that. That being said, I think we also, when I think of your work, Dr. Wagner, with us, I think of the numbers of hours we were in the public community talking about referendum, how you stood championing for public education, how you stood against vouchers over these years, and those are really, really important to think about, always recognizing and being out there with the public. The board used to be very involved in what's called Board Speaker Bureau, and I can't remember what the topic was, and a lot of our parents on the parent advisory who serve as PTO members wanted someone from the board to go out and talk about different issues and concerns. And I know you are always at the ready for that, to serve and support our families in our schools, so I appreciate that. People may not in the community even recognize that our Human Resource Department and Finance Department have tapped you on the shoulder along with Mr. Becker. All our board members serve on different committees, and those were the areas that we always tapped you on the shoulder with. Jean Marsh probably can tell you how many hours of countless discussions she's had in person with you and around human resource issues and concerns moving forward, as well as, I know, finance conversations, Wagner to Wagner, probably many times as well. And so the various proposals, initiatives that would come before the board go before you and Mr. Becker for discussion and insight, and because we valued your opinion and wanted to make sure that we had the board's needs met before we bring them forward. And then I think people would agree with me that we have appreciated working with you and for you as part of our service to and working forward as you as a board member and we as administrators. You've been always willing to listen. You may not have always agreed with us, and certainly not with me, but I think as reflective practitioner, well, I can think of several times, in a positive way. I think we always felt heard. I always felt heard, and most importantly, at the end of the day, it was always, always, always apparent to each of us and all of us, is that you had children at the heart of your thinking. And that's really important, the best interests of the children you serve. So I want to thank you for that, and you will be missed.
Chris, I just want to thank you. I can remember the day after I was appointed to the board back in 1998, so it's been 20 years since you've been appointing people. And you called me that next morning and invited me to come to see your school. And Preble was under construction at that time, and you gave me a thorough tour with incredible pride. And I've also appreciated your humor.
Yes.
We've shared many a chuckle. And I'd like to thank both you and Elaine for all the things that you've done for our community, not just in education, but to make us a better community. You will be missed.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your kind words. May I take a little bit of time? I mean, had I known all these kind words were here, I might have left a year or two ago.
We may not have thought of that.
In any event, again, I do appreciate your words. A couple of things I'd like to talk about. I know it's late in the evening and everybody would like to go home. And part of this is a matter of orientation and my orientation. Periodically, we have people come to the board and they get excited and they say, we pay your paycheck. And I even had a board member say that recently. I personally have never looked at it that way. That the implication is that I've been hired to do a job, and that's not it for me. It's volunteer work. I was elected by the electorate, not a specific group out there, and part of my responsibility is to listen to everyone in the community, filter that through my background and what I know, and then bring that to the table for discussion and trying to make an informed decision. So that's how I sort of look at that. I do want to thank my fellow board members. I think few people in the community realize that the meetings like this are just the tip of the iceberg. If you're going to be a diligent board member, goes well beyond this, and reading materials, visiting schools, talking to staff members out in the community, committee work, listening to parents and students, and even being gracious when sometimes people are rude to you. All that's part of being a board member. I'm going to compliment my fellow board members and those I've known in the past for giving of their time and energy to help make this community better, including the schools. That said, when I start out the year, this year has been very up and down for me for various reasons. And I sit here and it's rather bittersweet for me. I have enjoyed being part of the school district and the community. My wife and I are not running away from the community, but we have grandchildren that are quite much a draw. I will say that if a little over 2 months ago you said to me, Chris, you're going to be moving and not be here, I would have said you're crazy. I'm going to go through the rest of my term, and then I'll worry about it. Some things happen very quickly. Some things I didn't anticipate. I don't have a crystal ball, and that's how they played out. As I mentioned in my letter of resignation, I have worked with so many good and caring people, be they students, parents, board members, administration, staff, teachers, through the years. And I've, with very few exceptions, everyone I've met with have been good, solid people. They do have the interest of children at heart. I would say one of the commonalities for me, one of the foundations in the school district, at least in central office, Sandy and Linda, they were actually here when I got here. In all fairness, they were in a co-op elementary program when they were here. And I guess my last comment would be, I wish you all well, and I mean that sincerely. Thank you.
And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. You want to move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.